In at 5, The Collector. The Collector is a really catch-all legend for creepy hermetic neighbours that might be doing something strange in their basements. However, the most common legend is that of the neighbour who collects human body parts and proudly displays them in mason jars around their home. However, this legend has some real-world roots, unlike the rest of our list. Back in 2011, Russian police arrested a man described by the media as a cemetery collector for digging up 29 corpses and dressing the remains in female clothing to display around his home. This is an absolutely horrifying legend that became even more sickening after this event came to large. You may never know who your neighbour is or what they're doing after hours. Just don't go to their basement if they invite you inside. In at 4, The Black Bird of Chernobyl. Now, this legend garnered traction on the internet, of course, and focuses on a creature that is allegedly seen in Ukraine around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, specifically in the weeks leading up to the disaster on April 26, 1986. Now, its description is very similar to that of the Mothman and is humanoid in appearance and was presumed to have been black or dark grey in colour. It was also claimed by witnesses that it possessed wings and glowing red eyes. The black bird was spotted by several workers before they passed away, with some theorising that the bird was serving as an omen of doom, warning the workers of the lethal radiation within the plant. Not only that, some of the survivors shortly before the nuclear meltdown began to experience weird goings on, including nightmares, threatening phone calls, and encounters with the winged beast. Following the disaster, and as the Soviet helicopters arrived, circling the smouldering plant, dropping clay, sand, lead, and other extinguishing chemicals on top of the flame, some of the workers claimed to have witnessed a 20-foot bird gliding through the undulating tentacles of irradiated smoke, which was spewing from the reactor. Frightening. Coming in at 3, the Dell H. Robertson Middle School Spirit. The Dell H. Robertson Middle School is located in Las Vegas and is notable for its stories of specters and paranormal activity. Now, it is unknown when the school was founded, but as of right now, the school has around 1,138 students enrolled from grades 6 to 8. The nickname for the school is Angels, but it is unclear whether that is due to the hauntings that seem to occur within its walls. There have been countless reports from students who say they have seen an unidentified janitor roaming the halls of the school, with some even going as far as to say he had blood on his hands. Now, the history of the ghost is unknown, with no known reports of suicides, homicides, or even any accidents occurring on the site. However, students still report ghostly encounters, with some even seeing the janitor outside of the school grounds. One report from a former student stated that he lived a few blocks away from the school and would often see the janitor following him home and then disappear into thin air by the time the student reached his house. However, according to some students, the only thing that would make the haunting stop was by attending church services regularly. However, folks who didn't attend church continue to see the ghost, even in their nightmares. Now, the stories do vary from student to student, but many believe the unnamed janitor is the ghost who perhaps passed on while employed at the school. However, due to the fact that the only way to make the ghost disappear is by going to church, makes the entire legend seem like some kind of fable, perhaps even perpetuated by parents of the school in order to push religion. Just saying. In at 2, the ghosts of the MGM Grand Fire. Back on November 21st, 1980, a huge fire occurred at the MGM Grand Hotel, the second largest loss of life hotel fire in history of the United States and the deadliest event in Nevada state history. Due to the fire, 87 people died and over 700 were injured. Now, the fire began in a deli on the casino floor due to a number of electrical issues that took place that morning. The deli, however, had no sprinklers or smoke detectors, and after a failed attempt by one employee to contain the fire, witnesses contacted the fire department. A fireball then quickly exploded in the restaurant, setting the casino and the rest of the hotel ablaze. Firefighters did manage to isolate the fire to the first few levels, but couldn't control the smoke, which spread quickly up the hotel's floors, through the elevator shaft and stairs. Given that it happened in the morning, many of the guests were in their rooms asleep and were not even notified of the fire below. Some guests tried to escape into the stairwell, however the doors to each floor locked behind them and no one in the stairwell survived. Guests that did survive were those that escaped to the roof and were evacuated by helicopter or rescued by firefighters. Bally's Hotel and Casino, where the MGM fire once burned, is now said to be haunted, with guests reporting weeping and coughing coming from inside the rooms and the stairwell. Some have even reported ghostly apparitions on the same casino floor as the site of the fire. Many have even seen ghosts gambling as they were in their final moments of living. That is very bleak. And finally coming in at number 1, La Plaza Mansion Hauntings. The La Plaza Mansion is located on 1700 Burney Drive in Las Vegas and is said to be worth over $1.1 million. Now for many it is a place of rich history, with many willing to throw that money and more at the property. However, would you if you knew the home had some additional residents that you can't evict? Rumor has it that a mob boss had purchased the house years ago and had carried out many attacks and murders inside the home. Enemies and fellow gang members have all met their end inside the house, and rumor has it that the ghosts themselves are still lingering around. It was said that the behind the scenes events of Sin City's organized crime network all took place in the house, and those who disagreed were taken to a nearby room where they were ultimately killed. Some visitors to the home have even reported seeing blood covering the walls, and a handful of ghost hunters also noted a random drain sitting in the middle of the floor in one of the rooms, and it wasn't a bathroom. Just saying, that's where the blood goes. One couple who purchased the home reported being treated harshly by the ghosts of the house. At one point during a dinner party they saw a wine glass get pushed off the counter and then shattered on the floor. They also heard hissing noises and obscenities coming from adjacent rooms. Now the mansion was known for having secret rooms which past visitors would often come across. It was rumoured that these secret rooms were places where murders would take place, some of them so gruesome that blood can still be seen on the walls. Now there is no doubt at all that the home is filled with spirits of murdered men, but the reason they remain could be because the drains were filled with the blood of the victims. Awful. In at number 5, the body under the bed. This legend comes to us from folklorist Jan Harold Brunvand, who tells the story of the first time he heard the dead body under the bed legend back in 1991. Now there have been countless versions of this story, however they all remain the same. A Las Vegas hotel and a dead body under the bed. Here are just a few cases. On July 10th, 2003, a man checked into the Capri Motel and began complaining about a foul odor in his room. Management told him nothing could be done, and the man spent 3 nights there before checking out because he could no longer stand the smell. When the cleaning staff came in to make up the room 3 days later, they lifted the mattress up and discovered the body of a man in an advanced stage of decomposition. On June 10th, 1999, the remains of a 64-year-old man named Sal Hernandez was discovered inside a bed in room 112 at the Burgundy Motor Inn. In July of 1996, a woman's body was found under a mattress in a Travelodge, with the motel staff discovering the body 10 days after her demise, and only after guests complained for several days of a foul odor coming from the room. One of the oldest bodies under the bed stories comes to us from 1982. Richard Kuklinski, Daniel Deppner, and Gary Smith often teamed together to run auto theft scams. However, Kuklinski and Deppner decided to kill Smith, and they did this by feeding him cyanide-laced hamburgers in his hotel room. They then stuffed the body under the bed and left it there. There are countless tales of folks finding bodies under the bed, with the legends seemingly hailing mostly from Vegas for some reason. Perhaps just check under the mattress the next time you stay in a motel. You never know what you might find. In at number 4, the Megabucks Curse. Megabucks is a Nevada statewide slot jackpot network that is owned and run by the slot machine company, International Game Technology. However, there's a nasty legend surrounding the jackpot that have deterred some folks from even playing. The Megabucks has so many legends and myths surrounding it, which usually center around the tragic fate of previous winners, leading many to believe that winning the jackpot will result in your death. This legend has some merit thanks to one unfortunate winner, a cocktail waitress named Cynthia J. Brennan. In 2000, J. Brennan won the $34.9 million Megabucks prize played in the Desert Inn Casino in Vegas. Just 6 weeks after her win, J. Brennan was involved in a tragic automobile accident. Her sister was killed instantly, and she herself was left a quadriplegic. This is what began the legend of the curse. Since the event, many stories have surfaced regarding the fate of every winner, including a 25-year-old who won the jackpot in 2003. Others included untimely deaths in various ways, including a fatal drug overdose in a casino hotel and in a gang fight as far away as LA. Now these stories have proven to be false, but the legend persists. Other related legends to the Megabucks tell stories of underage players who could not claim their winnings, employees of a casino who won and couldn't claim their prize, and countless others. Now while stories do still persist, the curse itself seems to be false. However, the tragic story of Cynthia J. Brennan is still told by countless people who play the Megabucks jackpot. Would you dare? I would. Coming in at 3, New Jersey, The Watcher. Now this legend could honestly be the script for a horror movie. Let me break it down for you. A family begin receiving ominous notes just days after they close on their dream home. Yeah, spooky, right? Well, this story took off back in 2015 after a young family moved into a $1 million house in Westfield, New Jersey. However, they began to get letters signed by someone only IDing themselves as The Watcher. who claimed it was their duty to watch over the house, while also spouting weird lines such as, I quote, "Do need to fill the house with the young blood I requested," and "Who has the bedrooms facing the street?" Yeah, creepy. The writer also noted the make of the couple's car and the comings and goings of construction crews. He also observed that the couple had 3 young children, stating, I quote, "Was your old house too small for the growing family, or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me." Now, no one quite knows the truth behind the legend, whether it was a prank or a spooky neighbor, but what we do know is that the watcher was never caught and still remains watching the house in Westfield, New Jersey. Coming in at number 2, California Turnbull Canyon. Turnbull Canyon is a 4-mile loop trail located near Whittier, California, and is part of Puente Hills Preserve. It lies in the northern central part of the preserve and is an east-west canyon with relatively steep drainage. Now natives call Turnbull Canyon Hatunga, or the place of the devil, and is supposedly where the ghosts of those slain for not converting to Christianity dwell alongside witches and Satanists who reportedly used the place to sacrifice children, whose spirits now walk along the canyon. According to other reports, Turnbull Canyon also houses the ghosts of 21 children who perished in a plane crash back in 1952. However, there are no existing records of the incident, so this may be local legend. However, what we do know is real is that in the canyon lies the remains of an old insane asylum that supposedly came back to life to kill a teen in the 1960s via long dormant electrical wire. Not only that, but there are cults, alien encounters, and gravity hills. The list goes on and on. Basically, if something unnerves you, there is probably a story about it going down at Turnbull Canyon. Now, its origin is pretty simple. Turnbull's evil dates back centuries. However, it wasn't until the site was established as a fur trapping site in 1845 that things started to get a little odd, and very quickly word of the canyon's evil terror spread far and wide, making it one of the world's most visited places, but not for its beauty, but due to morbid curiosity. And finally, coming in at number 1, Virginia, the Bunny Man Bridge. This terrifying urban legend originated from 2 incidents in Fairfax County, Virginia in 1970, but very quickly spread through the Washington, D.C. area as well. Now, like all legends, there are many variations. Most involve a man wearing a rabbit costume who attacks people with an axe or a hatchet. Now, the legend goes that in 1904, a group of convicts were piled onto a bus to be transported from an asylum in Clifton, Virginia to a nearby prison. En route, however, one of the buses crashed and the convicts managed to escape. Thankfully though, the police were able to round up all of them, all but one. As their search went on, they began to find skinned, half-eaten bunnies in the woods and hanging from the overpass of Fairfax Bridge, now known as the Bunny Man Bridge. A year later, on Halloween night, several teens went to hang out under the bridge. Come morning, they were all found dead. Legend has it that if you hang out under the bridge on Halloween night, you will meet the same fate as the rabbits and the teenagers. Jump ahead to 1970, there were numerous police reports of people who had been threatened by a man holding an axe and wearing a white suit with bunny ears. Terrifying. A few other people also reported that the man in the suit threw an axe at them for trespassing near the bridge. To this day, there have been numerous reportings of the man with the axe, as well as the dead rabbits in the woods surrounding Fairfax Bridge, which is now known, once again, as the Bunny Man Bridge. Now, versions of the legend have varied over the years, particularly in the Bunny Man's name, motives, weapons, victims, and description, with some accounts stating that victims were mutilated and others that the Bunny Man is a ghost. However, that aside, the legend is absolutely horrifying and has prevented a lot of Virginia locals from wandering too close to the bridge. Coming in at 5, Arkansas, the Dog Boy. Now, the name may sound ridiculous, yes, but the story is truly chilling. If you find yourself at 65 Mulberry Street in the middle of a small Arkansas town of Quintman, you may very well encounter the hulking outline of a 300-pound, half-man, half-beast with glowing animal eyes. This is the Dog Boy. If you see him, walk quickly, as he is rumoured to chase people down the street, biting at their heels. just like a dog. Now, this legend is rare, because the story behind the story may just be even creepier than the legend itself. Gerald Bettis, the only son of the Bettis family of 65 Mulberry, was reportedly a problem child, but not a cute one. No, this kid collected and tortured animals before turning his sociopathic focus to his parents, supposedly imprisoning them in their home and murdering his father. Bettis was eventually imprisoned for growing marijuana on his back porch and would later die in a state penitentiary in 1988 of a drug overdose. Spooky stuff. Coming in at 4, Colorado, Riverdale Road. Riverdale Road near Thornton, Colorado is crammed with horrifying legends to bring even the bravest paranormal investigator to their knees. Riverdale Road is notorious for having some of the most chilling and endless ghost stories, beginning with the fact that it is literally referred to as the gates to hell. Yeah, now the gates themselves are simply made of rusty iron, yet people travel from far and wide to visit them. This is because the man who built the gates lost his mind once they were finished. He then burned his entire mansion with his family asleep inside. Worse still, he was never caught or put on trial. As of now, people report that a lady in white walks the road close by the gates, with many assuming she is the man's wife, wandering, searching for her murdered children or even her husband. Another ghostly story goes that there are accidents that specifically happen to joggers all the time. Once upon a time, a jogger decided to take a jog along Riverdale Road and ultimately got hit. They sadly passed away, and rumor has it their spirit now haunts the road. People who walk the road are said to have heard a loud heartbeat and footsteps. If you drive by, you might also feel something hitting your car when there's literally nothing there. Now, there are so many more stories, but we'll end with the Native American shapeshifters. Now, what makes Riverdale Road interesting isn't just the road itself, but because the area of land that it cuts through is also rumored to be haunted. For hundreds of years, there have been countless stories about Native American shapeshifters roaming the land, with many passers-by spotting them on the road. According to reports, they take on different shapes and communicate with people in their own ways. They're also known to play tricks on anyone who walks down Riverdale Road, so be warned. In at 3, the curse of the Ivan Vishily. Ivan Vishily is perhaps one of the most terrifying and shocking urban legends that is actually true and exists in the Russian history books. Now, the ship was built in 1897 as a transport freight across the Baltic Sea to the Gulf of Finland and driven by a single triple expansion steam engine. This ship was reliable, stable, and nothing unusual happened for the first 5 years it was on the sea. Then, one night changed everything. In 1903, the Russian government was preparing for war with Japan, so the freighter's role changed drastically overnight and the ship was ordered to carry cargo of war materials to Russian warships. The ship was first sent to the west coast of Africa to get coal, and after they stocked up, the crew noticed a change on the ship. Something wasn't quite right. However, they continued and set sail across the Indian Ocean. Now, the uneasiness that the crew was feeling was as if there was an invisible entity on the ship, as if someone was watching them, and the atmosphere just felt wrong or negative. The crew were visibly scared. Then one night, a man on the ship saw an apparition, a ghostly figure that was glowing with an odd mist, walking across the deck before disappearing behind a lifeboat. Of course, the sightings only made things worse for the crew, who were now on high alert. Just a few nights later, another crew member let out a terrifying scream, sending everyone into a panic. Then men went crazy and began to fight each other until one of them jumped into the ocean to his death. The crew had absolutely no idea what they were doing. A couple nights later, the crew just out of nowhere started to fight yet again, and another man jumped overboard to his death. The crew felt like they were being possessed by an unseen force. Once the ship finally docked, most of the crew abandoned the ship, and new crew were hired to handle the cargo. While out on the seas, the same thing began to happen, resulting in 2 people dying on the journey, including the captain, who flung himself overboard. This went on for some time until the crew finally realized the only way to deal with it was to burn the ship down. The sailors gathered in tugboats and watched on as the ship went down in flames. Coming in at number 2, the Well to Hell. The Well to Hell is a legend about a putative borehole in Russia which was reportedly drilled so deep that it broke through to hell itself. The legend holds that a team of Russian engineers in an unnamed place in Siberia had drilled a hole that was 14.4 kilometers deep before breaking through to a cavity. The researchers were of course intrigued by the discovery and lowered an extremely heat-tolerant microphone into the well. The temperature was reportedly 1,832 Fahrenheit, and the chamber was filled with flames. Screams began to be picked up on the microphone, tormented screams that were begging for help. However, the recording was later found to be looped together from various sound effects. Now, in reality, the Soviet Union had drilled a hole more than 12 kilometers deep in the Kola super deep borehole, located not in Siberia but on the Kola Peninsula. Upon reaching the depths of 12,262 meters in 1989, interesting geological anomalies were found, but nothing supernatural and definitely not the well to hell. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Russian sleep experiment. This is perhaps one of the greatest urban legends of not just Russia but of all time. It's simply known as the Russian sleep experiment, and according to the legend, researchers in the 1940s took 5 prison inmates and locked them in an airtight chamber with a special gas to keep them awake. This was so they could see the effects of prolonged sleep deprivation and promised the subjects their freedom if they could go 30 days without sleep. The results were of course absolutely horrific. On the 5th day, paranoia began to set in and the prisoners stopped talking to each other. On the 9th day, a few of them began screaming relentlessly, while others tore apart the books they were given, smeared them with feces and blocked off the one-way mirror so they couldn't be seen. Then, out of nowhere, the screaming stopped. 3 days went by without sound from inside the chamber. The researchers tried to address them via the intercom, stating that they were coming in and for the prisoners to lie flat on the floor. Then one of the voices answered, "We no longer want to be freed." After 15 days, the researchers finally opened the door, and the sight was apparently horrific. One of the prisoners was dead and completely torn to shreds, with chunks of him stuffed into the floor drain. The other 4 prisoners had mutilated themselves to the brink of death and were terrified at the thought of going to sleep and begged to stay inside the chamber. They were forcibly removed, and when surgeons tried to fix the damage they had inflicted on themselves, they resisted so strongly that they couldn't be sedated. They laughed as they were sewn back together, fully awake and aware. Eventually, after enough demanding, they were returned back to the chamber, after the head researcher told his team to lock them back in. However, one member of the team resisted, shot the head researcher and then shot one of the 2 remaining prisoners. Before killing the last prisoner, he asked just one thing: "What are you?" The prisoner responded, "Have you forgotten so easily? We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread." After this, the researcher shot the prisoner in the heart. Coming in at 5, Arlington's Screaming Bridge. Now this Texas legend will quite honestly make your hair stand on end. Legend has it that one full night more than 50 years ago, several teens were carpooling home after their high school football game. Still riled up over the victory, driving responsibly definitely wasn't of utmost importance to the young teens. The bridge running through Arlington's River Legacy Park was just wide enough for one car at a time. You can probably guess where this is going. The teens hooting and hollering drowned out all the noise, like that of a vehicle that had no working headlights. The cars collided head-on before erupting in a fiery explosion and plunging into the waters below. Nobody survived. The bridge is now closed to vehicular traffic, with the site only accessed on foot. However, it now has a new name gifted to it by locals: Screaming Bridge, a name which was coined after the first brave souls went exploring along the bridge and experienced events that can only be explained by the supernatural. Legend has it, if you stand on the bridge and gaze into the river below, you'll see a tombstone for each of the deceased with their names, date of birth and death. Visit at midnight on the anniversary and you'll hear 2 cars screeching towards each other before colliding. Coming in at 4, the nurse at Bexar County Hospital. If you ever find yourself in Texas, whatever you do not find yourself at the dilapidated Bexar County Hospital, because it is supposedly housing the spirit based on an American serial killer called Janine Jones. Now, the real-life killer is responsible for the deaths of up to 60 infants and children in her care as a licensed vocational nurse during the 1970s and 1980s. In 1994, she was convicted of murder and was sentenced to 99 years in prison with triple credit. Now, the legend of the nurse at Bexar County Hospital has similar treading, with legends stating that a murderous spirit used to wander the halls killing patients in order of their room number, first 201, then 202, 203, 204. It began in one ward where patients all began asking about one particular nurse. However, when the staff checked the security camera, they found the patients speaking to seemingly no one. They saw the curtains close on their own, tracheotomy tubes get pulled out by an unseen force, but then, very quickly, the patients began dying in their room number order. Like I said, many Bexar County locals believe the legend to be based off of Janine Jones, but what do you guys think? In at 3, Duende. Duende is a creature from Spanish folklore that has been conceptualized as a mischievous spirit inhabiting a house, often living inside the bedroom walls of young children. They are even known to clip the toenails of unkempt children, often leading to the mistaken removal of an entire toe. Yeah. No fun at all. Now, beliefs about duendes vary from region to region, but some say that they are the souls of infants who died before they could be baptized, whereas others simply portray them as naughty spirits that hide in a person's home and wreak havoc. Duendes became so legendary in Spain that in the 16th century there was even a law that said that anyone who moved into a home only to later realize it was infested with duendes were free to abandon it. Yeah. That's intense. No matter what, most stories about the duende seem to have a special relationship to children, most likely because parents used them as a tactic to scare their kids into doing things. Otherwise, the duendes were coming to kidnap them or even eat them if you don't clean your room, eat your dinner, bathe, etc. Coming in at number 2, La Llorona. La Llorona, also known as the Weeping Woman or the Crier, is one of the most famous legends not just in Spanish culture but across the world. This lore states that a woman was abandoned by her husband and was left alone to raise her 2 children. The woman was devastated, so she drowned the boys in a river out of grief and rage. As a result, the woman was condemned to wander for all eternity until she finds the bodies of her children, often causing death and misfortune to those near her. Now, according to the legend, in a rural village lived a young woman named Maria. She came from a poor family but was known around her village for her beauty. One day a wealthy nobleman came to the village, who stopped in his tracks when he saw Maria. He proposed to her and she immediately accepted. The two wed and had 2 sons together. However, the husband was always travelling, and when he came home he only paid attention to the children. And as time passed, Maria could tell he was falling out of love with her. She was right, because one day he returned to the village with a younger woman and bid his children farewell. Now, this is when Maria drowned her 2 children in blind rage. However, once she realised what she had done, she searched the river for them, but they had already been swept away. Days later, she was found dead on the river bed, having committed the 2 ultimate sins, murder and suicide. Her spirit now haunts the land of the living and the dead, weeping for her children, earning the name La Llorona. She kidnaps wandering children at night, mistaking them for her own, while begging the heavens for forgiveness, while drowning the children she kidnaps. Folks who have claimed to have seen her say she appears at night by rivers or lakes wearing a white or black gown with a veil, and others say that if you hear the cries of La Llorona, you are marked for death. Spooky. There was also a film, I watched it recently. It was utter trash, so hopefully the legend's creepier. Finally coming in at number 1, El Coco. The Coco, also known as the Cuco, Coca, or Cuca, is a mythical ghost monster equivalent to the Boogeyman, found in Hispanophone and Lusophone countries. In Spain, Portugal, and Latin America, the legend goes that parents will often invoke the Coco, or Cuca, as a way of discouraging their children from misbehaving. They sing them lullabies or tell frightening rhymes which warn their children of El Coco. If they misbehave or don't obey, El Coco will come and get them, and then eat them. Classic. El Coco is a child eater and a kidnapper. It may devour the child immediately and leave no trace, or it may take the child away to a place of no return. However, it only does that to disobedient children. El Coco is known to lurk on rooftops, on the lookout for misbehaving children. It takes the shape of dark shadows and represents the opposite of a guardian angel, with the El Coco frequently compared to the devil. Now, one of the oldest known rhymes about the Coco originated from the 17th century and went like this, I quote, "Sleep child, sleep now, else Coco comes and will eat you." I mean, straight to the point really, I respect that. Now you could easily draw comparisons between El Coco and the Boogeyman, however unlike the Boogeyman, Latino parents use Coco to drive the fear of God into their children. Now another legend has it that El Coco is Francisco Ortega. At the beginning of the 20th century, Ortega was so desperate to find a cure for his tuberculosis that he visited a curandera. He was told to drink the blood of children, so he kidnapped a 7-year-old boy named Bernardo. However, I have my doubts about this considering the original Coco rhyme predates the Ortega legend. What do you guys think though? In at 5, Lassie Guapa. This is a mythological creature that is commonly described as having human female form with brown or dark blue skin, backward facing feet, and very long smooth hair that covers the body. According to folklore, it is a hypnotic creature that lurks in the Highland Mountains and deep forests of the island, waiting for the perfect moment to lure men into the woods and make them disappear. Classic. Some people believe that the Iguapa bring death, and it is said you should not look them in the eye, otherwise you will be at risk of becoming permanently bewitched. They are considered to be magical beings, beautiful in appearance to some but horrendous to others. They are deceitful and hell-bent on capturing a wayward traveller. Now some legends suggest that not all are evil and do not wish to kill, though much evidence supports the benevolent claim. Law states that the only way to truly capture a Iguapa is by tracking them at night during a full moon, with a black and white polydactylic dog. The Iguapa also has a similar one-legged version from Colombia, called La Patasolo, who shapeshifts into a skull horse head. Lovely. In at 4, El Sombreron. El Sombreron is a famous legend told in books and film, and is also a boogeyman figure throughout Spanish culture. The figure is known by other names like Cipitio, the Goblin, and Sizimite. However, his characteristics are always the same: a short man with a black dress, a thick belt, a large black hat, and boots that make a lot of noise when he walks. He is said to ride horses and braid their tails and manes. So sweet, I think. When he cannot find a horse, he will hunt down a dog to braid instead. Now the legend goes that in the neighborhood of La Recolosi lived a woman named Susanna, the daughter of a woman who owned a store. She was known to be pretty with long hair and blue hazelnut eyes. One night when there was a full moon, she was on her balcony admiring the sky when suddenly a short man appeared wearing a big hat and holding a guitar. The girl's beauty had amazed him. He sang her a song, however her parents quickly made her come inside. Since that day she had not been able to sleep because she still hears the man with the guitar. She has not been able to eat because when her food is served it is contaminated with soil. Her worried parents took the young girl to a priest in order to rid her of the entity. A few days later, El Sombreron disappeared for good. Coming in at 3, Summit Elementary School. In Amarillo, Texas, there's a haunting legend surrounding a closed and abandoned school that everyone avoids. The Summit Elementary School is one of the most haunted locations in all of Texas, and its dark history makes it a hub for ghosts and spirits alike. The school was open up until 1972 and is haunted for numerous reasons, including a janitor who killed students and stuck them in the boiler, racially motivated murders that took place in the school, and murdered prostitutes hidden in the walls. These are just a few of the legends surrounding the terrifying building. Worse still, legend has it that if you're brave enough to visit the abandoned school at night, your car may do strange things. Swings will move by themselves and you might even hear voices coming from the walls. Honestly, this school is beginning to sound like the one from Marianne, which is a French horror series you all need to watch immediately. Do it. The Queen demands it. Coming in at 2, the Candy Lady. Now this very well might be one of the scariest urban legends I've ever read and may result in a lot of you sleeping with the light on tonight. Sorry in advance. This theory goes, I quote, "The Candy Lady allegedly lures children to their doom by leaving enticing goodies on their windowsills just before bedtime. Her plan is for the kids to wait for mum and dad to fall asleep before indulging in the sweet treats so as not to get in trouble. Afterwards, she'll grab them and feast on their sugar-laden blood until there isn't any left. Children began to go missing, yet no leads were ever found that would suggest they were kidnapped or ran away. As some of the remaining children got older, they confessed to eating candy left on their windowsills with a note from the Candy Lady, so parents started to wonder if the other children perhaps had been poisoned. The worry was soon put to rest when someone actually turned up dead. Not a child though, but a sheriff's deputy who had been investigating the disappearances. His eyes had been stabbed out with a fork, and his pockets stuffed with candy. A farmer also found a child-sized set of teeth inside a candy wrapper one morning while tending to his fields. Very creepy. The legend still remains in Texas, and whenever children go missing, people are very quick to blame the Candy Lady. And finally, coming in at number 1, Black-Eyed Children. Black-Eyed Children, or Black-Eyed Kids, are a contemporary legend of supposed paranormal creatures that resemble children between the ages of 6 and 16 with pale skin and black eyes, who are reportedly seen hitchhiking or are encountered on doorsteps of residential homes. Now, children are creepy already. They say strange things, and their innocence allows them to breach the barrier between the living and the dead that we jaded adults just don't possess. However, the Black-Eyed Children legend is one for the history books and is downright terrifying. In the late 90s, a journalist named Brian Bethel was working in his town of Abilene, Texas, when he encountered something he'll never forget. He was parked outside a movie theater when 2 children knocked on his window. Brian couldn't quite understand why, but he was completely overcome with fear at the sight of them. He rolled down the window regardless, and the kids asked him for a ride back to their home so that they could get cash for the movie. His fear, however, made him hesitate, but the children were persistent. They then began to say some weird things, like, "We're not armed" or anything. Brian looked back at the kids and noticed how their eyes had turned pitch black. They then began screaming at him that they could only come in the car if he invited them in, so he quickly drove away. He spread the word about the Black-Eyed Children and was surprised when a lot of other people came forward reporting similar experiences.
Starting us off at number 5, we've got the Pied Piper. We all know the legend of the Pied Piper at this point. This legend slash fairy tale dates way back and has different regional variations. Some say that the flautist drew snakes away from a town, others say it was rats. In various versions of the stories, Mr. Pied Piper can be portrayed as generous, greedy, benevolent, or evil. It's all up to the storyteller. However, in Transylvania's version, he was a terrifying hypnotist. See, at some point, there was an abundance of rats in a small German town. The townsfolk didn't know what to do until the Pied Piper showed up. Using his bewitching tunes, he paraded the rats out of town, never to return. He came back to the village expecting to be lauded as a hero and paid a sum of money, and neither of these things happened. He did his very best to convince the townsfolk that his services were worth their weight in gold, but they never did pay him. This made him quite upset. Leaving the town, he came up with a horrible revenge scheme. The next week, he returned, musical instrument in hand. This time, the goal was not rats or other pests. No, he wanted to lure away the town's children. And so he did, playing a new, hypnotizing song that tugged at the hearts and minds of all the kids around. He once again paraded out of town, but this time with their future in tow. By the time all the adults realized what had happened, it was too late. What did the Pied Piper do with these children? Well, there are different theories. A particularly grim idea is that he led them all right off a cliff, like human lemmings. Yikes. Another less terrible one that'll link us to Transylvania is that he led them to a cave in the region and sealed it up. Eventually, the kids did escape and they settled in the Romanian countryside. Some say that's why you can find plenty of blonde-haired, blue-eyed German speakers in the area. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Liar's Bridge. Oh, you're all in trouble. I see you down in the comments posting first like 10 comments deep and claiming that you don't like my shirts. I know fraud when I see it. Nobody better try to cross that bridge unless you're down to die. Okay, I'll elaborate. There's a bridge in Sibiu that has quite the reputation. It's said that anyone who lies while crossing it will cause it to collapse. That is serious. This legend has become so popular that many brides-to-be are required to declare their love and purity while crossing it, and if they're being dishonest, well, of course there's no way that the bridge would still be standing if this were really the case, as people love to lie. However, some have a less dramatic tale to tell, that the bridge will make certain noises upon the delivery of a lie, which could have something to it. The origins of the lying bridge are up in the air, but there are a few different explanations. Some claim that lying or adulterous spouses and fiancés would be tossed off the bridge if their impropriety was discovered. This would definitely explain the modern practices associated with the bridge. Others say that merchants who cheated their customers would be met with the same fate. Overcharge or sell something under false pretenses and take a dip. It could also originate with tales of cadets coming to town, wooing local lasses, promising them the world, and then disappearing forever. I would say that all these scenarios could result in a bridge famous for ending liars. Would you be willing to take a stroll across the footpath?
Coming in at 3, Jenny Greenteeth. Occasionally referred to as Ginny Greenteeth, this is an infamous figure in English folklore and is a river hag, not dissimilar to Peg Paulo or Grindy Low. Jenny Greenteeth would reportedly pull children or the elderly bodily into the water and drown them. This legend was popular in Lancashire and North Staffordshire, with many children describing this figure as green-skinned with long hair and sharp teeth, and is also described as lurking in the upper branches of trees at night, although folks are unsure if this is just the blurring of two popular legends, Jenny Greenteeth and Ginny Hewlett, a folk name for an owl. Now if you ask any Brit, they won't tell you how or why this legend began, simply because they don't know. There is no particular story behind Ginny Greenteeth, yet that doesn't stop reports of scared children running from a woman in a swamp. However, many do consider her to be a memory of sacrificial practices, or perhaps even a form of social control, parents evoking fear into their children in order to steer them away from dangerous ponds, streams, rivers, and canals. Coming in at 2, Black Shuck. Now this legend is perhaps the most common myth in Britain, specifically in the counties of East Anglia, known as Black Shucks, Old Shuck, or simply even Shuck. These are all the names given to a ghostly looking black dog that is said to roam the coastline and countryside of East Anglia. Along the desolate coastal flats, among the graveyard, in the darkest forest, that is where the Black Shuck lurks. This calf-sized malevolent hound with glowing red eyes is supposedly the harbinger of death, with it reportedly appearing during electrical storms, such as the one that struck the churches of Bungay and Blythburgh on the same day at the very same moment in August of 1577, leaving scorched claw marks on the church door. The incident resulted in 2 fatalities, with many reporting a feeling of dread. I quote, "All down the church in the midst of fire, the hellish monster flew, and passing onward to the choir he many people slew." Chills. D.A. Dutt wrote about the Black Shuck in his 1901 Highways and Byways in East Anglia book, stating, "He takes the form of a huge black dog and prowls along dark lanes and lonesome field footpaths, where, although his howling makes the hearer's blood run cold, his footfalls make no sound. You may know him at once, you should see him by his fiery eye. He has but one, and that, like the Cyclops, is in the middle of his head." Now, I could go on, but I really don't think there's need. Beware the Black Shuck, the harbinger of death and doom. And finally, coming in at number 1, Big Grey Man from Ben Macdhu. In Scottish folklore, the Big Grey Man, also known as the Big Grey Man of Ben Macdhu, is the name of the creature which is said to haunt the summit and passes of Ben Macdhu, the second highest peak in Scotland and the British Isles. Perhaps the most enduring myth on our entire list, the Big Grey Man is described as being an extremely large Sasquatch-like grey figure, covered in short hair, and wherever he ventures, he is said to be accompanied by a sense of irrational panic and dread. Evidence of the creature is limited to various sightings across Ben Macdhu, as well as a few photographs and unusually large-sized footprints, and almost all of the reports includes the sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel just out of sight of the witness. Now, the first recorded sighting occurred in 1891, however it wasn't made public until 1925. J. Norman Colley recounted their terrifying experience that they endured while summiting Ben Macdhu, alone some 35 years prior, stating, "I began to think I heard something else than merely the noise of my own footsteps. For every few steps I took, I heard a crunch, and then another crunch as if someone was walking after me but taking steps 3 or 4 times the length of my own." However, Colley isn't the only one to experience the strange footsteps. Many other Ben Macdhu climbers have reported the same sounds, as well as the similar feelings of fear and panic. Now, a few have summed this up as illusions, hallucinations even, natural stimulus brought on by exhaustion or isolation when climbing. What do you guys believe though? Coming in at 5, rats in the toilet. Urban legends about animals in sewers have been rife throughout history, with the most notable being the alligators and crocodiles in the sewers of New York, which for the most part actually turned out to be true. However, the thought of finding something in your toilet inches away from vulnerable areas of your body, well, that's something nobody wants to think about. While the alligators and crocodiles are a far reach, this legend seems to have some elements of truth. A toilet drain is just wide enough for a rat to climb up, first and foremost, with the animals being attracted to sewage lines due to undigested food in feces. They follow the pipes and boom, wind up in your toilet bowl. Back in 1999, a woman in Virginia got a nasty fright when she went to the toilet and found a rat there waiting for her. Honestly, I've never feared a toilet before, but I certainly do now. Apparently this has happened enough times for public officials to put out a warning. If you encounter a rat in your toilet, close the lid and flush. Godspeed. Coming in at number 4, the Bunny Man. The Bunny Man is an urban legend that originated in Fairfax County, Virginia back in 1970. The legend has many variations, but for the most part involves a man wearing a rabbit costume who attacks people with an axe or hatchet. Most of the stories occur around Colchester Overpass, a southern railway overpass spanning Colchester Road near Clifton, Virginia, sometimes referred to as Bunnyman Bridge. In the tale, an escaped mental patient takes to gutting bunnies and hanging them from the bridge, but later escalated to the madman hanging teens in a similar manner. However, the legend is based out of reality. Following extensive research into the Bunnyman, the legend was linked to 2 cases of a man in rabbit costumes threatening people with an axe, with the vandalism reports occurring 10 days apart in 1970 in Burke, Virginia. The first incident occurred on the night of October 19, 1970 by US Air Force Academy cadet Robert Bennett and his fiancée, who were visiting relatives in Burke. While returning from a football game that evening, they reportedly parked their car in a field to visit an uncle who lived across the street. As they sat in the car, they noticed something moving outside the rear window. Moments later, the front passenger window smashed and there stood a figure in a bunny costume. As they drove away, the couple discovered a hatchet on the car floor. The second reported sighting occurred on the night of October 29, 1970, when construction security guard Paul Phillips approached a man standing on a porch of a home on Guinea Road. The man was wearing a white bunny costume and appeared to be around 20 years old. According to Paul, the man stated, I quote, "You are trespassing. If you come any closer, I'll chop off your head." Now, while neither incidents resulted in death or disembowelment, the thought of an adult in a bunny costume wielding a hatchet is absolutely terrifying.
Coming in at number 3, we've got El Naraha. Another classic legend would be that of the siren. Beautiful women who dwell in bodies of water, singing bewitching songs and luring men to their death. They manage to prey on the fear of men and women alike. Men who are afraid that they'll be bewitched and end up dead, and women who fear that evil seductresses will lure their husbands and sons away. El Naraha is a uniquely Egyptian take on this monstrous melody maker. Originating from the Nile Delta, people who walked along the river would claim that they saw a mysterious, beautiful woman in the bushes or the nearby fields. During the day, she dwells in her underwater cavern, but at night she ascends to the surface and searches for victims. She'll call out a man's name, chanting it over and over, which more often than not will lure her chosen prey to his doom. No matter what he's doing, he'll drop everything and walk over to El Naraha in a trance. This usually results in him walking straight into the river until he drowns. Forget swimming, he'll be too distracted by the siren song. But wait, there's more! Some say that El Naraha sometimes falls in love with the man that she's calling. When this happens, she'll take him down to the underworld and marry him. For a while, they live in marital bliss, whatever that means in an underwater cavern, but invariably she'll kill her husband. After committing matricide, she'll bury his bones in her cavern to ensure that her secrets never make it out to the world at large. What do you think? Worth it? Coming in at number 2, we've got El Salawa. Originally from the times of the pharaohs, these wolf-jackal-fox hybrids have many stories to their name. They are said to live in the mountains, deserts, and other remote places of Egypt. It's not often that one will come across this majestic beast. This is for the best though, as they have no problem attacking and eating people who act in ways they deem unacceptable. Back in ancient Egypt, they were said to attack anyone who attempted to trespass in a temple or graveyard. The legend evolved over the years and took on a new form in modern times. It's said there was a man who accidentally married El Salawa. He lived with his wife and her sister, and every night they would leave the house for a strange period of time. Little did he know that his wife was actually transforming into this beast and heading out to dig up graves. Her sister would help her find human remains to eat in order to satisfy her hunger without killing anyone. The man ended up following the duo one night and learned their terrible secret. Thankfully, the wife spared his life for the sake of their children and soon after disappeared forever. Some say that she's still out there, digging up graves and attacking those who would trespass on holy land. Around 20 years ago, people in New Cairo reported seeing a creature like El Salawa and were so scared that they wouldn't go outside after dark. I wonder how those kids are doing. And finally, at number 1, we've got El Ghoul. Ghosts, goblins, and of course, ghouls. If you've ever read or watched Tokyo Ghoul, you'll actually have a pretty good idea of what to expect here. Humanoid creatures with one red eye who love to feast on human flesh. Often these beasts can transform into other creatures, usually taking the form of vicious animals or bloodthirsty devils. They haunt the streets at night, searching for their next unlucky victim. Sure, you can kill ghouls, but it takes a lot of effort. They have superhuman strength and agility, and even if you do land a blow on them, you have to be careful. Often when a ghoul is struck with a sword, they will beg for you to hit them again. They claim that this is to put them out of their misery. Any experienced ghoul slayer will know better though. If you strike a ghoul with one deadly blow, it will die. But if you go back and hit it again, it will come back to life and eat you. Double tap does not apply here. Knowledge is power, right? Although I would imagine it would be hard to resist going all out on a beast that ate one of your comrades. Fighting monsters is serious business. Coming in at number 5, we've got the haunted Rashidi building. Every city seems to have a building like this, but not all of them end up condemned in the same fashion. You know the ones, apartments and hotels so full of ghost stories and phantoms that no sane person would go near it. Children tell their friends the stories and adults stay pretty hush as to not attract suspicion. And of course, there's always an urban explorer or two who are willing to brave the unknown for a thrill. The haunted Rashidi building is an old apartment complex in Alexandria. Some call it the Jinn apartment, you know, because it's full of spirits. For the past 5 decades, it has been boarded up and shut down completely. Nobody in or out. There's even big tarps covering the outer facade, adding to the ghastly silhouette. What should be an average apartment building is now a thing of legend. It's been locked up so long though, it's hard to say whether the building is actually haunted or if it was just some over-superstitious thought from over half a century ago. Nobody knows why the ghostly qualities are the way they are, but there are many theories. Back when it was a functioning apartment building, the tenants would experience all sorts of craziness. One tale is of an apartment dweller who turned their taps on one day and found a nasty surprise. Instead of water flowing forth from the faucet, bright red blood poured into the drain. Others claimed to hear the sounds of screaming throughout the day and night. Some heard pained men, and others said they could hear terrified women scream. It's speculated that these cries come from the ghosts of laborers who were mistreated or even tortured by their supervisors. In the end, there's no solid proof of any of this happening, but I don't see anyone venturing into this old building anytime soon. But hey, if you're a skeptic, why not go grab some footage, eh? Coming in at number 4, we've got Abu Rega Masluka. The classic boogeyman stand-in. Every culture's got one of these. Western culture has the boogeyman himself, Spanish culture has El Coco, Britain has Spring-Heeled Jacket, and Egypt has Abu Rega Masluka. This monster is a favorite of parents everywhere. Those raising young children often lean on this monster in order to keep their little squires in line. The tale of the boogeyman is a classic, an unknowable, non-specific monster who will come and take you away if you're not behaving. The Egyptian version is extra terrifying though because his body is totally burned all over. Kinda like Freddy Krueger minus the stripes and the claw. Just as willing to teleport around and haunt dreams though. Apparently he is made from the remains of a child who didn't listen to his parents and ended up being burned alive by accident. Often if a child is acting up, their parents will tell you, smarten up, or he'll come and get you. This is usually enough to scare the little rapscallion stiff. See, if they don't clean up their act, this terrifying legend will notice, and once you've caught his attention, there is no going back. Later that night, he'll slink through the darkness to the child's room. Maybe the smell of charred flesh will alert the kid to his presence, or maybe the sound of him shuffling in the night. Either way, it's curtains. Abu Rega Masluka loves to steal these little misbehaving miscreants and boil them for supper. So listen to your parents, kids, or this urban legend will make a bubbling soup out of you. Coming in at number 3, we've got Baobao. It really does seem that every culture has their own version of the boogeyman. I suppose parents got really fed up with their young children, eh? Something we can all relate to. Baobao is exactly that, a Romanian boogeyman. However, I find this figure to be even scarier than lots of the other children snatchers. See, the Baobao stays in the same home as the kids. This cloaked figure is believed to appear whenever children misbehave, and is always waiting for his chance from a hiding place somewhere in the house. Sometimes it's the broom closet, other times it's the storeroom. Either way, I bet this knowledge scared the daylights out of a bunch of Transylvanian kids. Imagine playing around and coming face to face with the door concealing a mysterious man who will take you away for acting up. With this knowledge, I bet kids were actually quite well behaved. Unlike boogeymen in other cultures, the kidnappings also only last for a little while. The Baobao will grab disobedient kids and hold on to them for a year. So you don't immediately get turned into soup or drowned in a river, but instead you have to live with this terrifying man for 365. Give or take. No friends, no family, no good food, just hard work and a scary supervisor. If anyone did get taken away, it probably scarred them for life. After the year, they get returned home, and I'm sure their lives are never the same. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Ghosts of Teleki Mansion. Here we go, some real Transylvanian ghost stories. The region is known for its beautiful architecture and castles, so there's no surprise that all sorts of ghastly tales are attached to the ornate buildings. Unfortunately, Dracula's castle is Bram Stoker's invention and doesn't really exist. But there are plenty more spooky facades from where that came from. One such tale originates in the Teleki Mansion. This rundown and abandoned building was once an extravagant abode, but these days most locals do their best to avoid it. It's actually relatively close to the university town of Cluj-Napoca, in a smaller town called Okna Murs. Legend says this mansion is haunted by the drunken ghosts of soldiers. During the Second World War, a squad of soldiers broke into the mansion. They'd heard that there was plenty of good wine in the cellars and decided it would be a good night to imbibe. After locating the gigantic barrels, they had themselves a grand old time. As soldiers tend to do when given downtime with lots of alcohol, they got drunk. A little too drunk, probably. I say this because they ended up goofing around with their guns and firing them inside of the mansion. After causing a mess and a half, one unlucky marksman hit an unintended target. His bullet pierced one of the gigantic barrels, which started to flood the cellar. In all likelihood, a couple of barrels were probably punctured. Gallons and gallons of wine rushed into the underground room, drowning the soldiers before they could escape. I suppose that's as good a way to go as any, drowning in wine. Although I think the soldiers might have enjoyed it a little bit more if it was in their bellies rather than their lungs. And finally, at number 1, we've got people eating lakes. Sorry to all you Great Lakes swimmers out there, the Transylvanian bodies of water tend to be a little more aggressive than others. Of course, they don't actually eat people, but they drown enough experienced swimmers that folks started to claim that they had an appetite. One such lake is Lake Vendrell, which is known for devouring even the most skillful of swimmers. Remember folks, don't eat before going swimming, always have a buddy, and try to avoid voracious waterways. If the disappearances of swimmers wasn't enough, locals have also been known to find bloody chunks of people floating around. That doesn't usually happen when somebody drowns, right? Another lake famous for consuming is Lesser Lake. Apparently this oversized puddle once drowned an entire town. Something gave way, causing the lake to flood in and envelop everything. Neighboring towns thought the church was celebrating something based on all the noise the bells were making, but nope, the bells were ringing because the church was literally descending under the water. So yeah, you better watch your back around those Transylvanian lakes. They'll grab you before you can say backstroke. Coming in at number 5, we've got the two-striped Telemonius spider. We're gonna start this one off with an older tale. This one was actually quite popular back in the late 90s, the golden age of chain emails. It's likely that this urban legend was so effectively spread thanks to the relative inexperience of all online users, but it almost seems too silly to be real nowadays. Actually, wait. There are much less believable stories flying around the internet today. Never mind. Back to the actual urban legend though, there were many reports of the venomous two-striped Telemonius spider being found under public toilet seats. You know, as spiders do. Accounts were widespread, with stories popping up with various twists, making them seem like these spiders were biting and killing toilet users all over America. In fact, it got so popular that the Telemonia got a nickname, the butt spider. Seems legit. It gained notoriety through lots of chainmail and reposts, you know, the kind of stuff that your tech-illiterate great aunt would fall for. Don't forget to look, this is really scary in the subject line, etc., etc. One of the most famous chain emails detailed 3 bites in Chicago. The recipient suffered from fever, chills, vomiting, muscular collapse, paralysis, and eventually death. Sheesh, that is a scary spider, all from sitting on a toilet seat. The 3 women who fell victim to this terrible spider were seemingly unconnected until it was discovered that they had all recently visited the same restaurant. At first, people were blaming the food until a waitress came in to grab her check and used the washroom without eating. She also fell victim to these symptoms, which prompted investigators to check out said washroom. Lo and behold, they found a spider who liked cold, damp climates and had a deadly bite. The Arachneus gluteus. Seems silly now, but this spider was taken very seriously back then. This urban legend was actually started by a guy named Steve who wanted to prove how silly chainmail could be. He dropped in a bunch of hints like the name of the spider to ensure nobody would take it too seriously. But people still did, and they even put their own spin on the story, replacing ridiculous aspects with real ones. And as it circulated more folks became afraid of spiders and public washrooms. Way to go, Steve. You nailed it. Coming in at number 4, we have teens sewing their mouths shut. Parents will believe anything if they think it's harming their kids. Video games cause violence, classic books are bad influences, there are secret demonic messages in pop music. Now, those examples have been around for a while, even pre-internet. However, now that the internet is alive and well, there is a whole new category of bunk that people will believe has undue influence on their children. Viral Facebook posts with new moral panics attached each week. Stories about bullying, predators, dangerous apps, and more. It's enough to make your head spin. If someone can find an image of something seemingly dangerous and put a panicky caption below it, you better believe that all the Karens and Carols will share it like there's no tomorrow. The one we'll talk about today seems to imply that teens are going to undergo extreme body modification just for kicks. Folks were saying that teenagers had been sewing their mouths shut with needle and thread. I mean, I can see maybe giving yourself a piercing or a stick and poke tattoo, but why on earth would anybody sew their whole mouth shut for no reason? Posts were shared with an image of someone's lips apparently sealed via sewing kit, and folks were terrified that their kid would be the next to do it. Well, as it turns out, nobody was actually permanently closing their mouths. So what was actually going on? Apparently somebody had taken a screen grab from a YouTube makeup tutorial and convinced the world it was real. The actual image came from Promise Fan, who was doing a Halloween-themed video where she cut dark string to different lengths and glued the pieces above and below her lips. It's a pretty convincing illusion with some makeup used to color the spot where each piece ended to make it look bloody and bruised. However, if you watch the video, you'd know that just by opening her mouth, the pieces fall away. But try convincing a soccer mom frothing at the mouth, though.
Coming in at number 3, we have Polybius. Polybius is an urban legend that emerged back in the early 2000s, with it concerning a supposedly fictitious arcade game called Polybius. The legend describes the game as part of a government-run crowdsourced psychology experiment which was based in Portland during 1981. According to the legend, the game apparently produced intense psychoactive and addictive effects in players, with the machines being said to have been periodically visited by men in black for the purpose of data mining the machines and analysing the effects. Now, while the entire legend doesn't quite hold up, there are some pieces that are actually based in fact. Brian Dunning, host of the Skeptoid podcast, did some digging and discovered that 12-year-old named Brian Mara had become sickened during a 28-hour marathon video game contest in Portland back in 1981. Just a few short days later, the Portland arcades were raided by federal agents who seized cabinets that were being used for gambling. Add these two events and add some fictitious elements and you have the legend of Polybius. Coming in at number 2, we have Candyman. The Candyman is an urban legend that tells the story of a murdered slave who returns from the dead in search of revenge if you say his name 5 times. In 1992, a Candyman movie was released based on the short story The Forbidden by Clive Barker. This in turn sparked 2 sequels, as well as a slew of paranormal games that friends dare each other to play. According to the urban legend, if you look into a mirror and chant the name Candyman 5 times, he will appear behind you and kill you with his hook. Now, although this is a legend and you will likely not invoke him by saying his name, there is some reality to the story. In the Candyman movie, after saying his name 5 times, Candyman breaks through the medicine cabinet in a bathroom in order to kill his victim. This part is factual, believe it or not. Back in 1987, the Chicago Reader published a story about Ruth McCoy, a woman living in a Chicago housing project who called 911 insisting she was being attacked. When responders arrived, they found her shot body, with investigators determining that her assailants had gained access to her unit by climbing through her medicine cabinet, which adjoins the apartments. The complex was supposedly built that way so that plumbers could attend to leaks by simply removing the cabinet to reach the pipes. However, this in turn resulted in people using this method to burgle and murder. Absolutely terrifying. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Cropsey. Once upon a time, Cropsey was a mere urban legend, the boogeyman of Staten Island in New York City. Cropsey was rumored to be a homicidal madman who had escaped from a mental institution and had a hook for a hand, who supposedly hunted children and dragged them back to the tunnel system under an abandoned hospital. Parents would often use Cropsey as a way to frighten their children into being good and staying close to home. The urban legend became so popular it inspired a 1981 slasher movie called The Burning, which very quickly became a cult classic. However, what was thought to be fiction quite quickly became reality. In the 1980s, Cropsey came to life in the form of a deranged killer who really did kidnap children. He was called Andre Rand. Rand was a janitor at the Willowbrook State School on Staten Island, which would eventually be closed in 1987 due to corporate punishment and rampant sexual abuse. In 1981, Holly Ann Hughes did not return home after going to the store to buy soap. Rand supposedly pulled up, pulling Holly into his car and driving away. Then again in 1983, 11-year-old Thais Jackson was reported missing after her mother had sent her to purchase food. She never returned. She was last seen exiting the Mariners Harbor Motel in Staten Island days after Rand had been released from prison. Then in 1987, Jennifer Schweiger was reported missing, and her body was later found underground after a 35-day search. Rand was ultimately convicted of the crime. A documentary about the madman was made entitled Cropsy, in which they speculate that Rand may have been involved with Satanism and provided the children to be sacrificed. Ultimately, Rand was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, with eligibility for parole in 2037, at which time he'll be 93 years old. Coming in at number 5, Baranoff Castle. Now I should begin by saying that Alaska doesn't have any actual castles, however it used to. It was the Baranoff Castle and was home to many Russian governors in the 1800s. As of today, what remains is the hill the castle stood upon, and the gorgeous hill that spirits now reside on. Now the castle has a history spanning far longer than Alaska has been a part of the USA, which I guess isn't that long to be fair. Even before the castle was abandoned, tales of a mysterious ghost of a lady in dark clothing had become a local legend. It was supposed that she was a Russian aristocrat who had committed suicide on her wedding night after marrying a man she did not love. Now she walks Castle Hill and sometimes the Russian bishop's house nearby. She is also said to be draped in diamonds and a long black veil. She is said to be out most often at the midnight hour, aren't they all? And you may catch a glimpse of her bemoaning her fate. The area is known as Castle Hill in Sitka, and the site remains a popular tourist attraction. However, that is mostly due to the supernatural elements surrounding the mount. Would you dare step foot on Castle Hill? I dare you. In at number 4, Christmas Town. There's quite literally a city in Alaska called North Pole, where it is Christmas all year round. Which is a dream come true, I want to live there. However, this quaint Christmas town has a notorious reputation. In 2006, the snowy little suburb of Fairbanks was hit with a horrific incident when a group of 6 middle school students were arrested for plotting a Columbine-style mass murder at their school. The 7th graders planned to knock out North Pole Middle School's power and telephone systems, then move systematically through the school, shooting and murdering the teachers, as well as students who picked on them. Absolutely horrible. Now their plan would have moved forward if it weren't for an anonymous student who overheard their plans and reported them to the authorities. Thank God. It turned out that at least 6 students had knowledge of the plot too, but had failed to inform anyone about the potential killing spree. Seems now that Christmas Town has an awful legend surrounding it, with many movies based on the town depicting it as something rotten and dangerous, maybe even haunted.
Coming in at number 3, we've got a terrifying tailor. Werewolves tend to be associated with savagery. They're wolves after all. They run around looking for prey and howling at the moon, and when they do find prey, they tear it apart and eat it raw. But not this werewolf, he is a classy lad. Known as the Tailor of Chalon, he ran a clothing store in a French village. When he wasn't mending clothes, he was luring children into his shop. He would torture them endlessly, and when he'd had enough, he would slit their throats. It doesn't stop there either. Instead of eating them raw, like most werewolves tend to do, he would boil them up and have them for supper. And if he was really in the mood for some raw flesh, he would head out into the nearby woods and stalk people in his wolf form. After dozens of children disappeared, the tailor was suspected of being behind it all. Folks raided his store and discovered barrels and barrels full of bones. Yikes. At least he was cleaning up after himself, right? Coming in at number 2, we've got the Revenge of the White Wolf. This legend is a little more up to interpretation than a lot of the others, so let me know if you think it was a werewolf or something else. Alright, there once was a butcher named Bill. He lived in a town a little off the beaten path. Naturally, there was plenty of wildlife around. However, the wolf population was rapidly becoming a major problem. Livestock was being torn apart, people were getting attacked by packs, and townsfolk were afraid to go anywhere outside. Bill, being a man of action, decided to do something about it. He gave up his butcher shop and became a full-time wolf hunter. Over the course of a few years, Bill managed to kill over 500 wolves, and he made a pretty penny doing so too. The community was safe, and Bill was well paid and well respected for doing his part, so all was well. Well, sort of. Bill felt pretty guilty for killing all those animals and taking such an exorbitant sum of money, but hey, what can you do? A few years later, another wolf came into town. A farmer described a gigantic white wolf, one that was too fast to even try to shoot. After it went around terrorizing townsfolk for a little while, Bill decided it was time to go wolf hunting again. He bought a little lamb as bait, tied it to a tree, and camped out with his rifle. After that, he went silent. His friends hadn't heard from him in weeks, so they decided to go looking for him. When they discovered his fate, a brand new type of fear washed over them. The little lamb was still tied to an oak tree, intact and alive, but Bill was not so lucky. He was propped up against the tree and missing most of the important flesh from his throat. Poor guy. After that, the white wolf was never seen again. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Bray Road Beast. Most of these stories have taken place in a far-off past, so for our last legend, I'll bring it into the modern age. Bray Road is near the town of Delavan in Wisconsin. A solid trek from Milwaukee, Delavan is mostly known for its lakes and parks. But the multiple werewolf sightings put it on the map in a different way. While driving along Bray Road, Dorothy Gibson hit something. She got out to investigate but didn't see anything at first. And suddenly, a huge hairy beast charged at her car. Terrified, she hopped in and drove off into the night. She shared this story and it gained some traction. In fact, many other people who had similar experiences came forth with their Bray Road beast tales. Some folks had seen the beast on the side of the road, while others say they were actually chased by the creature. But when so many people claim to have witnessed the same pointy-eared monster on the same road, you have to start considering the possibility. Nobody seems to have managed to snap a picture of the beast, and sightings have gone down over the past little while. It was most active during the 90s, so maybe it just got a little too old by now. Regardless, that's the last thing you want to see when driving down the road late at night. Have you ever seen a werewolf with a Chinese menu in his hand? I hear they really like beef chow mein. Now I'm hungry.
Coming in at 5, Hairy Hands. The legend of Hairy Hands is infamous around the English moors of Devon, with this ghost story built up around a particular stretch of road in Dartmoor, which was purported to have an unusually high number of motor vehicle incidents during the last century. Now, between Cherrybrook and Postbridge in Devon, an isolated stretch of road named B3212 runs over the Leviathan Folds of Dartmoor, a wide open space that gives any traveller a claustrophobic sense of self, while amongst the natures in grand order. Along this stretch of road, there had been a high presence of driver, motorcyclists and cyclists falling prey to dangerous collisions and accidents. However, this isn't what's baffling, it is instead their story and recounts of how and why their accidents occurred. On the 26th of August 1921, an army captain was driving across the moors when, according to him, a pair of invisible hands took a hold of him and forced his motorcycle off the road. This resulted in London newspapers picking up the story and making this supernatural occurrence famous nationwide. However, this wasn't the only occurrence. Many others have also experienced hands, but not always invisible ones. Some have even reported to be hairy hands, grabbing their steering wheels and attempting to steer the hapless traveller off the road. More interesting still, not all incidents have occurred in moving vehicles. In 1924, a woman camping on the moor with her husband reported seeing a hairy hand attempting to gain access to her caravan. However, she reported that the hand retreated after she made the sign of the Holy Cross. Now, the story of the hairy hands has grown over the years, with many attempting to write a backstory for the baffling road, with a few local versions attributing the hands to an unnamed man who died in an accident on B3212. Coming in at 4, Beast of Bodmin Moor. Also known as the Beast of Bodmin, this English urban legend first came to light back in 1978, after multiple people reported sightings of mutilated slain livestock and an alleged panther-like cat. Now, the sightings of the Beast of Bodmin Moor are the most famous alleged wildcat sightings across the whole of the UK. This legend baffled folks across Britain due to the fact that owning or importing big cats is illegal and often results in the animal getting detained or shot, sadly. Bodmin Moor is a creepy place, beast or not, and should you happen to find yourself wandering alone across the rugged landscape, it is hard for your mind not to dwell on the legend of the beast. The giant cat-like animal was supposedly 3 to 5 feet long and sporting white-yellow eyes, and was reported enough for authorities to order an investigation into the beast and the mutilated livestock it left behind. However, the report concluded that there was no verifiable evidence of big cat on Bodmin Moor. However, there may be a logical reason for the reported sightings of the beast. It has been claimed that animal trainer Mary Chipperfield released 3 pumas into the wild following the closure of the Plymouth Zoo in 1978, and thus giving rise to the rumours of the beast. What do you guys think though? Big cat? Props. Coming in at number 3, the Alaska Triangle. The Alaska Triangle, oftentimes called Alaska's Bermuda Triangle, is a place in the untouched wilderness of the frontier state where a large number of people have gone missing. The triangle connects Anchorage, Juneau, and Barrow, with the latter being a small town on the state's north coast, and has some of North America's most unforgiving wilderness. Now, the triangle began attracting attention back in October 1972, when a small private plane carrying US House Majority Leader Hale Boggs, Alaska Congressman Nick Begich, and aide Russell Brown, and Bush pilot Don Johns vanished into thin air while flying from Anchorage to Juneau. Following the incident, more planes began to go down, as well as hikers going missing. Even Alaskan residents and tourists seemed to just vanish into thin air without any explanation. Since 1988, more than 16,000 people have disappeared in the Alaska Triangle, with a missing person rate at more than twice the national average, which is absolutely terrifying. Why aren't we talking about this? Now, the disappearances are often blamed on everything from severe weather to aliens to swirling energy vortexes to an evil shape-shifting demon of Tlingit Indian lore called Kushtaka. Absolutely insane, but I respect these theories. Honestly, it's probably just the weather, but you're cool. In at number 2, Saberwolf. Legend has it that Inuits described a wolf-like evil spirit of the Nahani Valley that kills people by biting their heads off. In some reports, the animal had long saber-toothed fangs and weighed upwards of 600 pounds, all of which they would use to hunt and kill their prey. The so-called monster has been spotted in Alaska at least once by an American mechanic, who described it as a wolf on steroids, as well as the crew of an American TV show, Alaska Monsters, who claimed to have an encounter with the beast. However, there may be an historical answer for the beast. Way back when, there was an animal called the direwolf that lived up until the most recent ice age. Thanks to research, science tells us that this wolf averaged about 100 to 150 pounds and was first thought to be predecessors to dogs as well as the grey wolf. The direwolf had bone-crushing jaws. However, archaeological evidence suggests it was a scavenger as well as a hunter. However, whether they still exist today, no one has a definitive answer, so perhaps it is a direwolf folks have been spotting, or maybe it is a saber wolf. What do you guys think though? Could just be a wolf. And finally, in at number 1, the abandoned copper mine. This abandoned copper mining camp is a National Historic Landmark district that became a bustling mining camp filled with miners and their families. Now, in 1925, a geologist predicted that the area would soon be mined out, and he was correct, because by 1938 Kennecott was a ghost town, and as of today is a popular tourist attraction. Now, more interesting still, in the Kennecott mines, it was not gold that folks were digging for, but instead copper. After copper was discovered in 1900 in the area, a group of wealthy investors formed the Kennecott Copper Corporation to mine the incredibly rich copper before, of course, it was abandoned along with the railroad, which was eventually abandoned due to the cost of constantly changing its position across a nearby glacier, and the mining camp in turn became a ghost town. A very haunted ghost town at that. According to reports, the spectral phenomena in the area, which included tombstones appearing and then vanishing along hiking trails, sounds of crying children, and poltergeist activity, was enough to drive away state government workers who were trying to redevelop the area into government housing projects during the 1990s. Yikes. If you want to venture into the supernatural realm, you can, with the abandoned mine offering tours for those brave souls.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Siren Head is the prototypical siren. No, I don't mean in the seafaring sense, although that would be fairly interesting. Sexy siren heads sitting on rocks playing music to lure sailors to their doom. We'll save that idea for another day. The siren I'm referring to is the invention we all know very well. The loudspeaker-shaped broadcast machine that alerts folks of impending danger. The devices strapped to emergency vehicles, the ones littered across areas with inclement weather. See, there's evidence that supports the idea that humans may have based their siren designs and sounds on Siren Head itself. People have discovered cave paintings featuring Siren Head across North America. These paintings appear to be quite ancient, leading some to assume that Siren Head has been around for centuries. How else could a big siren-headed humanoid appear in drawings from the olden days? If we're gonna take these paintings as fact, we can also assume that Siren Head predates the invention of the modern siren. Could this mean that Siren Head is actually the model in which modern sirens are based? If so, that would explain our visceral fear reaction to hearing the sound a siren makes. There's something about the undulating wailing that warns us of danger and really awakens a primal feeling deep within. Listen to a siren and tell me it doesn't make you want to jump out of your skin a little. Could it be that Siren Head, through use of sirens throughout the ages, has conditioned the human race to fear such a sound? And if so, what better way to make people feel urgency and alarm than by using that very sound in our modern technologies? See, many folks had assumed that Siren had adapted its behavior and appearance to play on our fears, but what if it's the base reason for those fears? Kind of a terrifying idea, isn't it? Coming in at number 4, we've got Siren Head can use sound in different ways. If we're on the topic of sounds that Siren Head makes, we should probably investigate a little further. Most folks are familiar with the general creepy sounds it makes, like broadcasting strange music, snippets of conversation, random numbers, and of course, sirens. It's constantly making noise of some sort, although it does emit white noise while asleep. These aren't dangerous on their own, but Siren Head makes use of them very effectively, deadly effectively. Many people tell tales of these noises being used to confuse human prey. Sometimes the sounds are used to disorient and scare, other times to attract people with familiar sounds. Siren Head has been known to use the voices of loved ones and people in distress to bait folks. More recently, however, Siren Head has been reported to be using sound more destructively. Stories of people being killed with pure sound have been cropping up, and it's unknown how long this ability has been around. There is one account of a whole neighborhood being killed, with each corpse found with ruptured eardrums and burst soft tissue. Oh my. The actual mechanism of death is still unknown. This has also happened in another case where a man was discovered by a park ranger hanging from a tree. When the rescue team finally reached him, they found that he was long dead, exhibiting similar symptoms such as ruptured eardrums and the burst soft tissue, which begs the question, how does Siren Head actually kill people? It also prompts me to wear some earplugs next time I go hiking.
Coming in at 3, UFO encounter in Manitoba. All the way back in 1967, Stefan McCallick ventured into the woods around Falcon Lake near Winnipeg, Manitoba, in search of silver and quartz, when he was startled by a gaggle of geese that erupted into a clattering of honks. According to his own report, he then noticed 2 cigar-shaped crafts hovering in the air before one flew away. However, the other one landed. Stefan stated that he waited half an hour before approaching. He heard mechanical noises, smelled sulfur, and felt warm air as he gradually got closer. As he did, he noticed an open door panel, and coming from within were colored lights and muffled voices that sounded like humming. Then, out of nowhere, the door panel closed, and a blast of gas from the craft knocked Stefan back and off his feet, with his clothes being set ablaze. He managed to take them off and ran into town when he began to feel extremely sick. Doctors quickly discovered that his sickness was caused by radiation, and officials who checked the site also discovered radioactive soil samples and metal melted into the rocks. Now, since then, the son of Stefan has written a book about the ongoing mystery. Stan McCallick, the son of Stefan, has previously stated that he very clearly remembers the day his dad came home sick and injured after something happened to him in the Falcon Lake woods. I quote, "I recalled seeing him in bed. He didn't look good at all. He looked pale, haggard. When I walked into the bedroom, there was a huge stink in the air, like a real horrible aroma of sulfur and burnt motor. It was all around and it was coming out of his pores. It was bad." The book was launched back in 2017 in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the incident. In at 2, headless ghosts in Old Montreal. The historic neighborhood of Old Montreal in Quebec is known to be one of the most haunted places in all of Canada. The city's oldest road, St. Paul Street, is supposedly a walkway for the paranormal at night, with visitors often reporting sightings of ghostly horse-drawn carriages or an apparition of Marie Joseph Angelique wearing the same white robe she had on when she was executed. Not only that, but Mary Gallagher, former Lady of the Night, is reported to appear on William and Murray Streets every 7 years, looking for her head, which was taken off by her one-time best friend. If this doesn't do it for you, you can also head over to the Old Montreal graveyards, which are known to be abound with ghostly activity, especially in Mount Royal, North America's largest intact cemetery. Visitors have claimed to see apparitions wandering around the plots at night, as well as hear giggling, creaking, and other eerie noises coming from within the cemetery. More interesting still, some of the ghosts that people have reported seeing include several people who perished on the Titanic, and an often seen Algonquin man who looks over the cliff to the city below. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Cave Monster. One of the most haunting legends to come out of Canada comes to us from my city, Toronto, once again, and supposedly took place in August 1978. It was during this time that a 51-year-old man named Ernest went looking for his missing kitten in a Parliament Street tunnel after crawling into an opening near his apartment building. This is where he described seeing a monster that had grey fur, red eyes, and weighing approximately 30 pounds. Now, if you're not from Toronto, we have a sprawling path system, 28 kilometers of climate-controlled underground walkways and shopping. However, what if I told you this wasn't the only underground city we have? Well, as reported by the Toronto Sun in March 1979, about 10 feet into the tunnel that Ernest explored, he spotted a thin, human-like figure some 3 feet tall, with, as previously mentioned, grey fur and slanted orange-red eyes. The creature supposedly hissed hissed at him, stating, get out," before fleeing down a side tunnel. Now, it is possible that Ernest was hallucinating or even lying, although saying that, the way the article was written seems to suggest that Laurie Goldstein, the reporter, believed him. Unfortunately, we'll likely never know what actually happened. When the story broke, the entrance to the tunnel had effectively been blocked off by collapsing concrete. Goldstein no longer remembers where the opening was, making the location virtually impossible to find. However, not long ago, someone online spoke of the underground tunnel that may have brought new light to the mystery. I quote, "There is a small opening to the underground tunnels off Parliament Street in downtown Toronto. The entrance is between two apartment buildings and leads to the tunnels via the sewers. The underground city beneath Toronto has its centre beneath Gerrard Street and Church Street. Above this area, strange magnetic effects have been observed. It is believed that underground equipment utilising powerful magnetic fields are responsible for the bizarre equipment failures that often are the cause of these accidents." Well, now we know the tunnels are real, do you believe the monster is? You decide. And at 5, the Lady in Red in Lower Bay Station. Now, a Lady in Red is a popular theme in many legends and ghost stories, with few popping up across America and Canada. However, this one comes from Toronto, specifically below Bay Station, where another subway station lies, Lower Bay Station. The Toronto Transit Commission reportedly opened the station in 1966 while experimenting with routes, but soon realized that if the route was to become delayed, it would slow down the entire subway system. Therefore, it was shut down just 6 months later. The city later went on to build Bay Station on top of it, connecting the two platforms with a red door that is only accessible to employees. Workers and occasional movie productions still use the old station, however, and it is here that folks have claimed to have seen the Lady in Red wandering the abandoned tracks. People have reported that she has no legs and had only black holes for eyes. Her apparition only lingers for 30 seconds before disappearing. Some believe it to be a woman that was pushed onto the tracks, but no records of any such incident exist. Others think it's more likely she was a former resident of Potter's Field, a cemetery for social outcasts and the poor, which the city attempted to relocate in 1855 to build the station. Coming in at 4, the legend of Gibraltar Point Lighthouse. The Gibraltar Point Lighthouse is located on the Toronto Islands in Toronto. Beginning in 1808, it is the oldest existing lighthouse on the Great Lakes and one of Toronto's oldest buildings. Now, due to its age, this lighthouse is of course shrouded in mystery, specifically regarding its first keeper, J.P. Radamula. According to the legend, soldiers from Fort York visited J.P. on the evening of January 2nd, 1815 in search of his bootlegged beer, but they had too much to drink and a dispute broke out, culminating in the keeper's murder. The inebriated soldiers tried to conceal their crime by chopping apart the corpse and hiding the remains. In 1893, then keeper George Dernan searched for the corpse and found part of a jawbone and coffin fragments near the lighthouse, though it was never definitively proven that they were linked to JP. As one of the oldest legends in Toronto, the truth behind the lighthouse keeper's death and disappearance remains a mystery even to this day, and the legend certainly lives on.
Coming in at number 3, we got the Talking Angela app, unsafe for kids. I'm sure most people have heard some version of the story before, an app that spies on your kids and gets them to share personal information. Maybe it's run by hackers or pedophiles or both. This was a very popular tale when Talking Angela, a widely available app, was at the peak of its popularity. Kids could talk and interact with a Parisian cartoon cat with features like facial recognition, voice playback, and a text-based chatbot. Rumors about Talking Angela's safety had been circulating since release, with all sorts of folks claiming that it was a luring tool for pedophiles or a front for hackers to speak with children. This led to the urban legend getting a little bit out of hand, with Facebook moms posting all sorts of ridiculous stuff that even got picked up by news organizations. A lot of these posts read something like, "Attention, parents and grandparents, do not download this app. I just saw a post from another mom and it says that it takes pictures of your kids without you knowing, and it also knows where your kids are, and it asked my precious Caden what his name was and where he went to school. Oh, delete it right away or else." It's all very sensational, but hey, it's a new era of urban legends. Not all of this is totally unfounded though. Although it has been proven that Talking Angela is not run by hackers or pedophiles, it can engage in chat and ask questions, and it can share photos to social media. However, these features must be turned on by the user. I think the real lesson here is, don't leave little Taylor and Skylore alone with the iPad. They don't know any better. Coming in at number 2, we've got Scary Clown Murders. Oh, Man, 2016 seems like it was so long ago at this point. I feel like I'm dredging up ancient memories that are actually only 4 years old. Who remembers the killer clown phenomenon, when creeps and freaks would wander around town in clown costumes carrying weapons? That was a wicked urban legend. Sure, plenty of folks were posting videos and pictures of the clowns meandering around, but most, if not all of these, were hoaxes. People had heard the rumors of it happening and decided to contribute to the legend in their own way. The first big story, though, was from the Global Sun, who reported that weapon-toting clowns had crossed the US border into Canada and killed 23 people. Yikes. People glommed onto this and it spread like wildfire. Unfortunately, not too many people read the whole article. If they clicked the link and made it to the bottom of the page, they would have realized that the Global Sun was a fake news site that doesn't publish factual stories. But by the time anyone had figured that out, it was too late. Clown fever had taken North America by storm. You couldn't log on to any social media without seeing some POV video of someone being menaced by a rubber-masked assailant in the middle of the night. It even got to the point where residents of Greenville, South Carolina reported that clowns were trying to lure kids into the woods. Like most urban legends, there was no real evidence to back any of this up. It just seemed like people's innate fear of clowns was being exploited. And finally, at number 1, we have Ebola zombies. Just like the more recent Corona zombies hoax, this story became legendary when somebody tried to capitalize on the fear and uncertainty surrounding a pandemic. After a Liberia-based newspaper published accounts of 2 Ebola victims coming back to life under mysterious circumstances, the internet exploded with theories and stories. Anything zombie-related seems to have a wicked grip on the minds of people everywhere, so this kind of story really sets the imagination alight. Remember the bath salt zombies and voodoo zombies? People just want a zombie apocalypse, I guess. So after the newspaper published a story about 2 women coming back to life, the locals started to panic. They thought that women were ghosts and shouldn't live among them. Eventually, it got enough traction to make it to an international news outlet, but all the reports were missing key details. There was no information on how or when the patients were declared dead, and there was nothing on what happened between their deaths and their resurrections. Seems a little fishy, right? Well, the rumors died down after a while, but reports of a 3rd victim coming back to life resurrected the Ebola zombie narrative. Even though this 3rd case appeared to be satire, the internet was once again ablaze with Ebola zombie chatter. Since then, there have been no additional reports on these so-called zombies and no corroborating resurrections. So if there were Ebola zombies, there weren't too many of them, and their animation was not contagious. Coming in at number 5, we've got the wolf strap. Like many other famous monsters, many folks assume that werewolves are usually the result of another werewolf attacking somebody. During a full moon, bites, scratches, and injuries can be extra worrisome. But being hunted down unsuccessfully by a lichen isn't the only way to join their ranks. Many legends tell of different objects that may assist people on their journeys to wolfdom. The most ubiquitous of these objects is the wolf strap. Basically a ceremonial belt, these lengths of leather can be used to transform someone into a werewolf. Put it on, you'll become a fearsome monster. It's not necessarily that simple though. First, you have to sell your soul to the devil. You have to know all the symbols to carve into the leather, and you have to frequently take care of it by rubbing herbs and oils on it. But if you're really interested in becoming a wolf and don't know any werewolves that would bite you, this might be the simplest method. Having an object of power such as a wolf strap leaves would-be werewolves pretty vulnerable when they're not in their bestial state though, so if you do take this route, make sure you've got a good hiding place. There's an old story from Russia concerning somebody with a wolf strap. A man lived way out near the farthest edge of the village and kept mostly to himself. People, as people tend to do, spun all sorts of crazy stories about this eccentric hermit. One night, while walking by his property after a fresh snow, a young lad noticed some strange tracks all around his house and barn. This was enough to pique the interest of some locals who came out to investigate. They found the tracks coming out from the front door of the house and leading into the woods. Suddenly, a howl ripped through the night. Some villagers immediately turned around and left, while other, braver folks decided to stick it out. When the man returned home, they took him into custody and searched his house. In a hidden chest, they found the engraved leather strap covered in oils and grease. What else to do but burn it all? Man included. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Werewolf of Bedburg. You may have heard of witch trials, but what about werewolf ones? Yep, folks used to get a whole party together to go out blaming people for the brutal deaths of livestock. Once someone was convinced a person was a werewolf, there was really nothing that could be done about it. Concerned citizens would arrest them, put them on trial, and torture them for hours on end until they got a confession. Whether any of what you confess is true is between the accused and God at that point. A famous trial comes from the tale of one Peter Stubb. For years, folks from Cologne and Bedburg lived in fear of wolf attacks. Dozens of people died in gruesome ways, often torn apart and partially eaten. Forensics weren't quite ready to be used effectively back then, so most people had to simply get on with their lives after any such attack. However, some people were stalwart in their belief that there was a werewolf causing all the carnage. Eventually, a group of determined villagers found a gigantic wolf and fought against it. They used spears and sticks to beat it back and eventually were victorious. The actual account of what happens next is strange and most likely unreliable, but that's what makes an urban legend fun, isn't it? Somehow it was discovered that Peter Stubb was the werewolf. He had been killing people, he'd been stealing the livestock, he'd been howling at the moon. Needless to say, the locals were shocked. This was probably the biggest news they'd ever experienced. And like 16th century folks tend to do, they decided that all new and strange things must be eliminated. So after torturing him for hours, he admitted to it all. He made a deal with the devil to acquire a wolf strap. He murdered 16 people, many of whom were children. He was the wolf those villagers fought. Then, of course, he was burned. What, they couldn't afford a silver bullet? Coming in at number 3, we have Siren Head stalks the back roads. Many urban legends take place in specific locations. Bathroom mirrors, specific bodies of water, empty train stations. Siren Head has marked off his urban legend territory, back roads, wooded areas, and rural towns. It's been said you should be especially careful on country roads at night. You never know when something might run out in front of your vehicle. But what's scaring them out there? Definitely don't get out of your car, and if you do, don't follow any mysterious noises. Although, you might not get a chance to investigate if you consider the sound-based death Siren Head can apparently deal. Appearances have also been reported in open fields by passing drivers. At first, it seems to be a scarecrow or a big piece of installation art. Drifters even claim to see a telephone pole walking through the woods, playing an old song from hanging speakers. This lines up nicely with the claim that Siren Head likes to make prey of campers and hikers. So make sure wherever you go, you're well prepared. Those easily distracted or lost are often the ones who disappear. Don't make yourself easy pickings. Coming in at number 2, there's more than one? Oh yeah. Evidence is mounting for this idea. Some may say that one Siren Head might be changing its form to more effectively hunt people, but with sightings increasing and more variants being reported, the one and only theory is losing traction. All sorts of folks have reported seeing all sorts of Siren Heads. There's the classic with 2 sirens at the top, or even ones that have many more than that. Some appear as moving power lines or street lamps. I've even seen art of Siren Head neon signs. Although that might just be a concept for now. Add in the variety of locations people have spotted sirens, and we've got a veritable species on our hands. Many sightings have been in Pennsylvania, but reports have come in from all over North America. The cave paintings we mentioned earlier support this claim, with ancient depictions being found in different caves across the continent. And most variants appear to be the same height, but there are shorter ones out there. Rural areas are the preferred hunting ground for Siren Head, but more reports of distinctly suburban sightings have been showing up. They're adapting and spreading and ready to cause problems for all sorts of people. Keep an eye out. And finally, at number 1, they hunt for sport. The most dangerous game, too. Man. Thanks to a handy little fact sheet put out by the man himself, Trevor Henderson, we know that Siren Head does indeed exhibit predatory behavior. However, nobody's quite sure what it gains from the things it kills. It's uncertain as to whether there's a nutritional benefit from hunting, and nobody seems to be clear on what happens to the bodies that disappear following a Siren Head attack. Now, sure, the fact that nobody knows why Siren Heads hunt doesn't mean that they must be hunting for sport, but if you consider the hunting methods it employs, you might reconsider that position. It's clear that Siren Head uses subterfuge and deception to disorient and confuse prey. This could all be a game for the lanky lad. It could all be for fun. It's humanoid in shape, why wouldn't it be humanoid in action? Coming back to that report of the multi-siren creature killing an entire neighborhood, there's another detail that is extra disturbing. If the beast had killed all those folks and consumed them somehow, its motives would be more clear. But all of the corpses were left undisturbed. Why would something kill all those folks and not take any of the bodies? Well, for fun, or maybe to control our population. We're the in-season game right now. And speaking of games, Siren Head often sticks to the woods, yeah? Well, this is good camouflage for it, but if it was food it was looking for, I'd say hikers and campers wouldn't necessarily be a steady source of nutrition. It's possible that Siren Head prefers the woods for the same reason that human hunters from the city do. They like the thrill of it. They don't need to hunt to feed a family, but it's good exercise, and nature is lovely, isn't it? I wouldn't discount the idea that we're just a fun thing to kill for Siren Head. Well, were you ready for all that? Do you believe any of it? Will Siren Head find its way into the hallowed halls of urban legend history? Give it a few more years and maybe a few more mysteries, and maybe it just might.
Coming in at 5, Schneider's Alley. Located in Adelaide, Australia, a man known as Dr. Michael Schneider acquired the Clifton Manor in the early 1900s, a mansion located on the 40 acres of land in this picturesque landscape. Who wouldn't be happy? The doctor very quickly moved his wife and 2 daughters in, and for a brief time everything was good. Schneider had a cabin on his land that he used to treat patients. However, rumor has it most of his patients were schizophrenic or mentally ill, and he decided to treat them on his secluded land to keep them away from his family. However, in a bizarre turn of events, his wife and 2 daughters all died due to an unforeseen accident. Schneider went mad, and the cabin was his place of torture where he would work through his grief. However, it wasn't a healthy outlet, with Schneider using the cabin to perform surgeries without any form of anesthesia. Neighbors even reported hearing screams coming from the property, and rumors very quickly spread throughout the town that the doctor was killing and dismembering his patients as a form of satanic ritual. The cries continued, but no investigation was conducted until the doctor died. The police found Schneider in his home with the limbs and bodies of his dead family surrounding him. It is now rumored that the mansion is haunted by Dr. Schneider and his patients, and for those that enjoy fear, you can explore Schneider's Alley, which is now known as Andrew's Walk. But be warned. Coming in at 4, Bodies in the Bridge. The Sydney Harbour Bridge is perhaps one of the most iconic landmarks in Sydney. It's a heritage-listed steel through-arch bridge that carries rail, vehicles, bicycles, as well as pedestrian traffic between the business districts and the North Shore. However, this bridge houses an incredibly dark secret. It is widely known that the construction of the bridge took 8 years to build and resulted in deaths of up to 16 iron workers. These deaths have been recorded in the history books. However, it was not noted that there were actually far more deaths, with another 3 workers losing their lives, with the government covering up and remaining hush-hush about the entire thing. So why exactly did this happen? They were transparent about the 16 lives that were lost, but why not the other 3? Well, the story goes that the other 3 construction workers fell into the huge pylons while building was underway, and retrieving their bodies was deemed too difficult and costly, given that the workers were under immense pressure to complete the project. So rather than delay, they instead decided to leave the bodies embedded in the pylons, where they supposedly remain to this day. If the myth is true, the Sydney Harbour Bridge is actually one giant burial site. Remember that next time you visit it.
Right up at number 3, we have the unusual story of the Birmingham vampire. Now, take this one with a pinch of salt or garlic, because it's equal parts absurd but also terrifying. In 2005, reports of a vampire on the loose in Birmingham hit the press after a man had gone on a rampage around Glen Park Road in Ward End. Described as a young-looking man in his 20s, this attacker had reportedly bitten a male pedestrian and then continued to bite people who'd come to the man's aid. One woman was said to have had an entire chunk of flesh bitten clean out of her hand. Over the following weeks, police and the media were contacted by a number of people from all across Birmingham, claiming that they had been similarly attacked. Some residents claimed that they had been unsuspectingly opened the door and then were outright bitten by a strange, ravenous man. Some believed that the vampire had himself been bitten by a rabid animal, with others believing that he was willfully spreading rabies before he croaked. Whatever he was, he definitely left a terrifying impression on the good people of Birmingham, my people. Wrapping it up at number 2, we have the crying girl of King's Cross Station. Heading over to the Big Smoke of London, the urban legend of a young woman who roams the corridors of King's Cross Tube Station has been actively reported since the late 80s. She is described as a modern-looking young woman with long brown hair and dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. People have reported hearing sobbing uncontrollably, weeping with her arms outstretched and screaming at passers-by. An inconceivable number of people have seen the crying girl, but whenever they have tried to comfort her, she disappears completely into the crowd and vanishes. Now, this urban legend is tied to a tragic event that happened in 1987, where a pedestrian had carelessly dropped a lit match whilst riding the escalator. The resulting fire was devastating, spreading rapidly through the station and killing 31 people, as well as trapping hundreds of others underground. Some say that the crying girl is a cautionary tale, harking back to the tragic fire at the result of one careless person, whilst others say that she is definitive proof of the spiritual world, and a mortal reminder of those innocent lives that were tragically lost. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have the Enfield Poltergeist. In August 1977, a strange series of disturbances at a council house in Enfield, London, held the nation spellbound for over a year. Sisters Margaret, 14, and Janet, 11, claimed that they were being possessed by an evil spirit, a poltergeist that would physically attack them, throwing rocks, toys, and furniture about the house. The girl's mom, Peggy, called the police after she witnessed her children levitating out of their beds. On arrival, the police constable wrote himself that they had seen a table and chair smash against a wall, seemingly out of nowhere. Over a period of 18 months, more than 30 people had witnessed paranormal events at the house, including police officials, neighbors, psychic researchers, and journalists. They reported strange, disembodied voices, guttural chanting, flying furniture, and heavy objects being thrown around the house. The Enfield haunting left experts on both sides of the spectrum completely perplexed, with famed paranormal investigator Ed Warren convinced that the events were proof of the demonic realm. Whatever happened, the story of the Enfield poltergeist remains an urban legend lodged deep in the psyche of British society, and a reminder that even your own home can hold a haunting.
Coming in at number 5, we have the ghost of Stowe Lake. The history of Stowe Lake, located in the Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, is shrouded in mystery. Stowe Lake is said to be haunted by the spirit of a woman who, after attempting to save her child who fell in the water, drowned in the lake. Now, legend goes that this woman, referred to as the White Lady, so always the White Lady, wanders the edges of Stowe Lake as she searches for her baby. It is said that she can even be summoned by visitors, with the most active area surrounding the lake being near the Pioneer Women and Children statue. The legend states that the statue, depicting a woman with children, houses the spirit that haunts Stowe Lake. People have noted that at night the statue seems to have 3 children surrounding her instead of 2 older ones and one that is barely a toddler. Anyone wishing to summon the White Lady can do so by calling out, "White Lady, White Lady, I have your baby," 3 times, which seems very cruel if you ask me. Now, if she believes you, the woman will appear before you and will ask for her baby back. However, for doing this, the woman will haunt you for the rest of your life. However, if you tell the woman you don't have her baby, legend says she will drag you into Stowe Lake and give you the same death she suffered. It is also noted that the White Lady of Stowe Lake is not the only ghost to be found residing in San Francisco, of course, and if you wish to explore the creepy haunted history, you can do so with Haunted San Fran Ghost Tour. Coming in at number 4, we have the Dark Watchers. The Dark Watchers is a name given to a group of entities in California folklore purportedly seen observing travelers along the Santa Lucia Mountains. The Dark Watchers are said to be tall, sometimes giant-sized featureless dark silhouettes often adorned with brimmed hats or walking sticks. They are phantoms that are said to lurk inside the Erie Mountains. Legend has it that the Dark Watchers have claimed to be seen staring out at the vast space below the mountains before completely vanishing. Now, this legend may be attributed to the Chumash people who historically inhabited the central and southern coastal regions of California, with the ghostly figures first appearing in their Indian history and lore. The cave walls were donned with drawings by the Chumash that depicted these phantoms. John Steinbeck also went on to write about the Dark Watchers in his story Flight, where the creatures were described as dark forms against the sky. I quote, "Pepe looked suspiciously back every time or so, and his eyes sought the tops of the ridges ahead. Once on a white barren spur he saw a black figure for a moment, but he looked quickly away, for it was one of the Dark Watchers. No one knew who the Watchers were, nor where they lived, but it was better to ignore them and never to show interest in them. They did not bother one who stayed on the trail and minded his own business." Steinbeck's son, Thomas Steinbeck, would also grow up to report having seen the Dark Watchers during his childhood, and later, along with artist Benjamin Brode, collaborated on a book titled In Search of the Dark Watchers, where they go into the history of the legend and interview locals who claim to have seen them, such as the famed Big Sur resident Billy Post. In more recent history, sightings occurred in the 1960s by a Monterey High School principal. Coming at 3, Fossa Grimmen. Simply known as Grim, this is a water spirit, or troll in Scandinavian folklore. This water spirit plays the fiddle and is described as being exceptionally talented with the sounds of forest, wind and water playing over his fiddle strings. He is a young, handsome man who sits naked under waterfalls. What's not to love? Playing mostly the music of nature. Grim is said to be willing to teach his fiddle skills in exchange for a food offering made on a Thursday evening, and in secrecy. The offerings he accepts is a white goat thrown with head turned away into a waterfall that flows northward northward, smoked mutton stolen from the neighbour's storage 4 Thursdays in a row. However, if there is not enough meat on the bone, he will only teach those seeking the skill how to tune the fiddle. What a dick. However, if the offering is satisfactory, he'll take the student's right hand and draw the fingers along the strings until they all bleed. But after that time, the student will be able to play so well that, I quote, "the trees shall dance and torrents in their falls stand still." It is rumoured that Torgeir Orgensen, better known as Millergutten, was a famous fiddle player from Telemark, Norway, who was so good at the fiddle that he was believed to have sold his soul in exchange for Grimm's skills. Coming in at 2, Nokken. Nokken is the Norwegian name for a specific type of water spirit, also known as the Nak or the Nika. The Nokken are supposedly able to shapeshift, but are more commonly known as male water spirits who lure women and children to their deaths, usually using their enchanted violin. This most commonly occurs at Christmas or on Midsummer's Eve, with the Nokken targeting pregnant women or children that had yet to be baptized. Now, it's not easy to describe the appearance of the Nokken due to its tendency to shapeshift. However, reports have stated that he is a rather elegant man, oftentimes lurking inside the waterfall. Seems to be where all the hot men are lurking these days. However, sometimes he has been depicted as a brook horse. Be warned, the Nokken will become unhappy if he does not have access to water, with tales emerging of one spirit who went to live with a human after they had fallen in love, but was unable to stay due to their deep yearning to be by the water. So if you ever find yourself lured in by the Nokken, just drain that waterfall and run away. Easy enough, right? However, don't fret too much, with most crediting this legend as a manifestation of the dangers associated with water. And finally, coming in at number 1, trolls. I mean, of course, trolls are the primary legend in all of Scandinavian mythology and folklore. Old Norse history describes trolls as beings that dwell in isolated rocks, mountains, or caves and lives together in small family units that are rarely useful to human beings. Now, trolls are said to be inspired by the cruel giants who were the primary enemies of the gods who lived in the mountains of Utgard. They are said to have human-like appearance, but they are incredibly big and ugly. No shame, just facts. Now, like all legends, it varies from source to source, with some trolls being dim-witted, some have no particular grotesque characteristics, to others being dangerous to human beings. Now, although some are described as being man-eaters and as turning to stone upon contact with the sun, trolls are also attested as being solitary beings living far away from civilization. Upon the arrival of Christianity around the 1300s, the stories began to change, with stories emerging of the trolls being able to smell the blood of a Christian man, with them basically representing anything of the old times, which the new religion condemned.
Starting us off at number 5, we have the terrifying series of tales from Newsham Park Hospital in Liverpool. Now, I actually lived in Liverpool for quite a number of years, and believe it or not, I visited Newsham Park Hospital. Why? Well, I was young and stupid, and I've since learnt better. Originally built as a chapel in 1873, Newsham Park Hospital saw a series of incarnations during its construction. Firstly, it was an orphanage for sailors' children, but then in 1879, it was converted into a sanatorium, an asylum for the clinically insane. Finally, after the fallout of 2 world wars, the site became Newsham Park Hospital, and the infamous location of hundreds of reported ghost sightings. Now, if you ask any of the Liverpudlian locals what the most haunted building in town is, they'll all point you to Newsham Park Hospital. The most commonly reported legend is that of the ghost of a small female child who roams around a particular top floor corridor. Some believe that she was spotted in this very photograph, and if that is indeed the case, then I won't be going back to Liverpool any time soon. Bringing it in at number 4, we have the Beast of Bodmin Moor. Hey, that rhymed. The Beast of Bodmin Moor has been driving the population of Cornwall up the wall ever since the first purported sightings in 1978. The tale began with the occasional reports of mutilated and slain livestock found by Cornish farmers. Perplexed at the fact that their cattle were dropping like flies, the locals started to look for answers. The wounds inflicted to the livestock appeared to be too deep and wide for any local wildlife like foxes and badgers, and the signs began to point towards the actions of a big cat, particularly a panther-like cat. Rumours began to surface of the incredibly likely possibility of alien big cats finding their way into the British Isles. People began hypothesising that wealthy collectors had imported leopards, panthers and jaguars as part of their private zoo collections, which had later either escaped or been set free. The idea being that, well, if you illegally owned a giant leopard, you wouldn't exactly inform the police about it. In 1995, an official investigation reported that there was no verifiable evidence of any exotic felines on the loose in Britain, and that the slain farm animals were more than likely attacked by a local species. But, well, less than a week after the report was released, a small boy discovered a large cat's skull lying about a river. It measured around 4 inches long and 7 inches wide and possessed 2 incredibly sharp canines. Now, the authenticity of this has later been disputed, but now it has the Cornish locals convinced that the legend of the Bodmin beast is very much still alive.
Coming in at 3, the Satanists of Perth. This may come as a shock to some Australians, but according to many rumours, Perth is home to a thriving community of satanic worshippers. Yeah, fun times. According to reports and speculation, these worshippers come together at Kings Park in the dead of night to perform these devilish rituals, with the group drawing strange symbols, burning figures, as well as having wild, non-stop orgies on the grassy slopes of the mount. And of course, once a year, the coven come together and perform a human sacrifice. According to some theorists, the group does this by hunting down and murdering the local homeless as a means to sustain their power with the devil. Coming in at 2, Sydney's subterranean world. Locked away deep under the hustle and bustle of Sydney's major train station lies a network of train platforms, tunnels, and tracks that were built in the 1920s but were never operational. This was to be one of the first underground stations in Australia. However, the plan to continue work on additional lines was cancelled when the Great Depression struck. The labyrinth of tunnels extends 1 kilometre in 2 directions, from St James Station about 30 metres below Hyde Park and past the Cahill Expressway entrance off Macquarie Street. Now, these tunnels lay unused under the streets of Sydney, which has over time led to some downright creepy rumours and speculation. A few urban legends have arisen, including that of an albino eel that is said to reside in the St James Tunnel Lake, as well as that the underground level was built by marauding first settlers to aid them in their kidnapping schemes. Now, many urban explorers have gone deep into the tunnels, taking disturbing and unsettling pictures that they've shared online. In one explorer's picture, they captured an unsettling picture of Satan with a skeleton cross and a heart on fire, with them stating that it represents hell. Spooky. Would you dare explore this subterranean world? I wouldn't. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Burning Airman. Back in 1940, a horrible tragedy struck Canberra when a Lockheed Hudson bomber plane lost control and crashed into the woods. The event was a bizarre occurrence, considering it was a sunny and clear day with the plane coming into land from a normal flight, before suddenly just nosediving into a field and bursting into flames. It was a terrible incident that was ultimately dubbed Canberra Air Disaster, and went down as one of the most tragic events in Australian history. However, it didn't end there. Years later, reports began to come in from local residents who had strange encounters in the woods, with many of them claiming they saw odd lights near the crash site, and many others claiming that they heard the distant drone of an airplane, followed by a loud bang. However, the most terrifying of them all was a local teenage girl who emerged one night from the woods in a fit of terror, claiming that she had been chased by the dead airman, whose spectral body was covered in flames. What was previously a popular makeout spot for kids is now closed, and instead houses a memorial site for the deceased airman. Coming in at 5, Huldra, also known as Hulda. These are seductive forest creatures found in Scandinavian folklore. Huldra derives from a root meaning covered or secret and is often depicted as just one individual. However, through folklore, it has changed to an entire Hulda race and not just one single entity. Hulda is described as being a troll-like woman living in the woods and is known to be fair and beautiful, but wild, and is known to have long hair which she hides behind her back upon meeting a human. This legend goes that Adam and Eve had a handful of children, and one day when Eve was giving her children a bath, God came to visit her. However, Eve had not yet bathed all her children, so she hid the ones that were dirty. God asked her, "Are there not more children?" Eve said no. So God responded, "Then let all that is hidden remain hidden." And thus the ones hidden became the underjuriski. Excuse my pronunciation, please. Which means the ones living underground. The hidden children became lost souls under the surface of the earth, calling for someone to be with them, usually human passerbys. Huldra was one of these children, yet somehow managed to remain on the surface of the earth. Be warned, she is neither good nor evil and cannot be trusted. Coming in at 4, Jotni, also known as Jotun or Jotna. This legend is described as being a type of entity contrasted with gods and other figures such as dwarfs and elves. In Norse mythology, Jotni appears as a giant being, often ugly and lumpy, with many of them in possession of great knowledge. Oftentimes the Jotney is described as riding on a wolf with vipers as reins and is believed to be depicted in this 10th century picture stone from the Hunnestad monument. As I previously stated, most Jotney possess great wisdom. For example, Vavtrudni, I don't know how to pronounce it, who was clad with the very same knowledge as Odin. Legend goes that the Jotney are Thor's most dangerous opponent, and is a major motif in Norse mythology, with the Jotney residing in the Great Mountain area of southern Norway. Now throughout history the folklore has become blurred, with some stories blending Jotney and trolls together into one, but that is simply not the case, with these two legends having very separate histories throughout folklore. And that's the tea. Coming in at number 3, the monster of Elizabeth Lake. Now I should preface this point by saying that there are at least 10 different Elizabeth Lakes in California, but the one we're talking about today is in LA County near Palmdale, and is perhaps the oldest one in the state. Now it is said that Elizabeth Lake was created by the devil himself for the keeping of his hellish pets. The legend also goes on to state that if you swim deep enough you will stumble across the passageway to hell. Throughout the years there have been countless sightings of a monster that is said to have the neck of a giraffe, head of a bulldog, bat wings, and is said to be 50 feet long with a rancid scent of decay. For over a century, sightings have been reported and strike fear into the locals' hearts. It is said that locals have been so scared that landowners would actually sell or completely abandon their properties. Not to mention any attempt to build on the lake's land has come to no avail. At night, residents could hear screams from the lake and would have horribly disturbing visions. Farm animals would also disappear and sightings of flying winged creatures were also reported. However, like all urban legends, any proof of creatures' existence or death is yet to be discovered. Coming in at number 2, we have Turnbull Canyon Hauntings. Turnbull Canyon is a 4-mile loop located near Whittier, California, and is part of Puente Hills Preserve. Turnbull is known for the view it provides of the Hysley Temple and Rose Hills Memorial Park. However, it has also been the source of rumors regarding paranormal activities. Death is said to reside within the canyon, with the place itself once being referred to as Hutuknan, which means the place of the devil. The legend tells of the region being haunted by the Indians who were murdered for not converting to Catholicism. Their spirits are now said to linger in unrest in the canyon. Years later, Turnbull would also be the site of numerous satanic rituals held by cults attempting to conjure demons or even Satan himself, often by sacrificing children from the nearby orphanages. However, one day one of the sinister cults suddenly vanished, and what was left behind in their wake were paranormal sightings and occurrences being reported by hikers and locals, who have also claimed to have seen hooded figures, hellish creatures, and mutilated children. Not to mention more mysterious deaths have since occurred, with one teenager being electrocuted while exploring the ruins by an old asylum in the canyon. A plane also crashed there in 1978, taking the lives of 29 people. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have the Hollywood Sign Spirit. Probably one of the most infamous legends to come out of California is the Hollywood Sign Spirit, which is said to be haunted by early 1900s actress Peg Entwistle. Entwistle was a British stage and screen actress who began her career back in 1925, appearing in several Broadway productions. By 1932, during the height of the Great Depression, Entwistle was in Los Angeles with a role in the Romney Brent play The Mad Hope starring Billy Burke. Following that, Entwistle found her first and only credited film role for radio pictures called 13 Women. However, on September 18, 1932, a woman was hiking below the Hollywood sign when she found a woman's shoe, purse, and jacket. She opened the purse and found a suicide note, after which she looked down the mountain and saw the body below. Entwistle's body remained unidentified until her uncle, with whom she had been living with, identified her remains. The suicide note was eventually published and read as follows: I am afraid. I am a coward. I am sorry for everything. If I had done this a long time ago, it would have saved a lot of pain. P.E. Nowadays, Entwistle is referred to as the Lady in White, who is said to appear to people hiking to the off-limits part of the sign, where she killed herself. However, as opposed to appearing as the beautiful actress she is often seen with a skeletal face and deep hollowed-out eyes. It is also said that if hikers are alone, the Lady in White will influence them to also plummet off the Hollywood sign.
Kicking us off at number 5, we've got the Red Room Curse. If you're familiar with the dark web, or maybe even some Cronenbergian techno fetishes, you might assume that Red Room means murder broadcast, and technically you're correct. But there's more than one Red Room out there, and the one we'll discuss today is a little less voyeuristic. just as online though. The Red Room is an internet legend about a cursed pop-up that would appear from time to time on people's computers. It would show a door and ask, "Do you like the Red Room?" Now you can answer yes or no or maybe, but the result is going to be the same. People who have come across the pop-up are invariably found dead. Their room becomes the Red Room, with the walls covered in their blood. Shortly after the legend gained traction, a flash animation of a boy cursed by the pop-up showed up. It was quite popular at the time. In fact, it linked a real-life murder to the Red Room curse. The schoolgirl that committed the Sasebo slashing in 2004 was found to be a fan of the flash animation. The 11-year-old student killed her classmate with a utility knife, slashing her throat and arms. When questioned by police, she admitted to the crime and said that she had been bullied online. The girl she killed had called her a goody-goody and made mean comments about her weight. In addition to bookmarking the Red Room animation, it's also worth noting that the killer had read and watched Battle Royale, where school-age students fight to the death. Now, links between violent media and violence are always weak at best, but this is quite the interesting development. I knew pop-ups were annoying, but to lead to something like this? Sheesh. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Kune Kune. While researching this, I also found that Kune Kune is a very cute breed of pig. No relation. But if you get scared, maybe consider taking a look at a picture of a pig or two to take your mind off the spooks. The Japanese urban legend Kune Kune is a lot less cute. In fact, try to look too close and you'll really regret it. The myth originated online around 2003 with people giving first-hand accounts of seeing this being. These reports were not unlike early accounts of Slender Man, with folks claiming to have seen or photographed something strange with bad things happening afterwards. Kune Kune translates roughly to wriggling body, which is exactly what it does. It's a slender humanoid made of white paper or fabric that appears in fields on hot summer days around lunchtime. It's been seen on wide open rice fields most often, and sometimes even over open water. If there is a great expanse, you might see Kune Kune off in the distance. This thing wiggles its limbs about endlessly as if it's being constantly blown by wind, even when there is none. It can only be seen from a distance. Interestingly enough though, people that seem to be right beside it don't tend to notice its presence. People have reported seeing workers on fields go about their business without so much as a passing glance at the thing. If you do see one from far away, do not try to get any closer. Looking too closely at a Kune Kune can cause you to go insane, and if you try to get close enough to touch one, it might kill you. Keeping your distance and not attempting contact is the best strategy here. It ignores people who offer it the same amount of disregard. Now, because of all the details concerning distance and lack of close-up confrontation, many skeptics claim that Kune Kune is just people's overacting imaginations, misinterpreting maybe a scarecrow or a wick drain. But you will not find me hurtling through rice fields to find out.
Coming in at 3, the Changeling. A changeling is a creature found in folklore throughout Europe, specifically Germany, and is believed to be a fairy child that had been left in place of a human child stolen by the fairies. It's a common theme stemming all the way back to medieval literature and reflects concern over infants thought to be afflicted with diseases or disorders. So this specific legend goes that once upon a time, at Heslock near Odenheim, a servant and a cook of a clergyman were married and living together. However, their newborn baby would not grow or gain weight. The mother was told to visit Neuhausen and give her baby water from the Syriac spring, with many believing that a visit to the spring would either restore a child back to health or would kill it within 9 days. En route to the spring, the child became heavy and monstrous in her arms, which resulted in a passing traveller yelling to the wife that she had the devil on her back. I quote, "Your child is at home in a new cradle behind the chest in the side room. Throw this monster into the brook." The mother cried but did as she was told. She threw the creature into the brook and a great howl bellowed from beneath the bridge. She fled home where she found her baby, healthy and laughing in its brand new cradle. Coming in at 2, the Children's Crusade. According to history, the Children's Crusade was a failed crusade by European Christians to regain the Holy Land from the Muslims, said to have taken place in 1212. Now the story has become blurred over the years from factual to more mythical, with some versions including the visions by a French boy and a German boy, an intention to peacefully convert Muslims in the Holy Land to Christianity, with bands of children marching to Italy, and some being sold into slavery. Yeah, it's rough. In this specific German legend though, the story tells of a misguided German boy who was visited by Jesus, who told him to go forth and convert Muslims. So following the orders of Christ, he gathered a sizable group, mostly children, and led them towards the Mediterranean, where they took boats east. Now during their journey, one boat crashed, killing everyone on board. The others, however, arrived in Tunisia, where the children were sold into slavery, and in turn, none of them made it to their destination. Sad. I would have rather been on the boat. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Werewolf of Moorbach. This legend goes that the Rhineland town of Wittlich is the last place in Germany where a werewolf had been killed. Thomas Johannes Baptist Schweister, what a name that is, was a supposed deserter from Napoleon's army and fled to his homeland in France. While passing through Wittlich, him and his hungry soldiers who fled with him located a farmhouse which they pillaged. However, in the process they were discovered by a farmer who they promptly killed along with his sons. The farmer's wife witnessed the deed and cursed Thomas, screaming, "From now on at each full moon you will change into a rabid wolf." So what did Thomas do? He crushed her skull. Of course. Anyway, as time went on, the curse began to take effect and Thomas's personality changed. He began to rob, rape and pillage until he eventually fled to the sanctuary of the deep forest, where he took on his wolf form. He began to slaughter livestock and animals in his new form before a group of villagers discovered him, killed him near the village of Moorbach, and buried him. They lit a candle that would burn continually. As long as the candle is lit, the werewolf could never return. In at 5, Fan Death. This is quite a bizarre one that I'm honestly surprised I never heard of before. Supposedly in Korea there is a genuine fear of fan death. Now fan death is a well-known belief in Korean culture where it is thought that if you have an electric fan running in a closed room with an unopened window, you will quite literally die. Now of course there is no definitive evidence to support this strange claim, yet it's still widely believed. Where this legend came from is unclear, but fears of electric fans date back to their introduction to Korea, with stories existing in the 20s and 30s, warning the risks of nausea, asphyxiation and facial paralysis to electric fans. Yeah, this is not a joke. Now you're probably asking yourself what the proposed cause of death actually are. Right, well first up is hypothermia, heat stress. Now, air movement will increase sweat evaporation, which cools the body, but in extreme heat, when the blown air is warmer than the body's temperature, it will increase the heat stress placed on the body and in turn causing heat exhaustion. Now the EPA, aka the Environmental Protection Agency, discourages people from using fans in closed rooms without ventilation. However, they do approve of a fan if a window is open. Very strict fan rules here, guys. Now the second proposed cause of death is asphyxiation. It is alleged that fans may cause asphyxiation by oxygen displacement and carbon dioxide intoxication. Honestly, I've spent my whole life using fans and I'm still here. I think, anyway. I don't know. In at 4, red surgical mask. As most know, plastic surgery is quite a big deal in Korean culture, as it is in America and the rest of the world, with the pursuit of perfection a thing that most strive towards. So this legend goes, I quote, "A man is sitting in an empty subway car when a tall, thin woman walks in and sits in front of him. Her hair is dark and long, it covers most of her face, but he can see that she has a red surgical mask on. Thinking nothing of it, he leans back and watches the door close. The man notices her eyes and she catches him staring. He smiles at her. She asks the man, 'Am I pretty?' Taken aback, the man stammers, 'Yes.' She takes her mask off, revealing the rest of her face. There was a gash from ear to ear, her gums, teeth and ligaments showing. She screams at the man, 'Am I pretty now?' In terror, the man tries to get her as far away from the woman as possible. She takes out a scalpel and makes her way to him when the doors open and the man runs out. Now, this legend may sound familiar to a lot of you, and that's because it shares very similar roots to Slit-Mouthed Woman, a malevolent figure from Japanese folklore who partially covers her face with a mask or object and carries some sort of sharp instrument. According to popular legend, she asks potential victims if they find her attractive. If they respond no, she will kill them with her weapon. However, if they say yes, she will reveal that the corners of her mouth are slit from ear to ear. Now it's uncertain where the legend originated from, whether it was Japan or Korea, but regardless, it's straight up terrifying. Coming in at number 3, the Black Forest, Germany. The Black Forest is a large forested mountain range in the state of Baden-Württemberg in southwest Germany. Historically, the area was known for ore deposits, which led to mining featuring heavily in the local economy. However, in more recent years, tourism has become the primary primary industry, accounting for around 140,000 jobs. Now, the forest itself got its name from the conifers that block out most light below, giving the area a mysterious aura. The forest is nestled deep within the southwestern Germany, with the area's tall evergreens being as sinister as they are beautiful. It is also said to be home to paranormal creatures ranging from witches to even werewolves. This in turn inspired the Brothers Grimm to write their famous stories, Hansel and Gretel, Rapunzel, and Sleeping Beauty. Some of the many legends that surround the forest goes as follows: a headless huntsman riding on a white steed, a king who kidnaps women to take them to his underwater lair, and of course friendly dwarfs and frightening werewolves. It makes sense now why this would be the location of many of the Brothers Grimm's fairy tales. Coming in at number 2, Hoia Baku Forest, Romania. The Hoia Forest is situated to the west of the city of Cluj-Napoca, near the open-air section of the Ethnographic Museum of Transylvania. It is a beautiful place that often lures in bikers and hikers from around the world. However, according to legend, the forest is the location of paranormal activity. According to one visitor, I quote, "We are in the clearing. The trees stop in a uniform oval where nothing grows and where, since official records began, nothing has grown. Once when I came here," says Alex, our guide, "I found 60 people from Bucharest trying to open a gate into another dimension." Now, the clearing is supposedly the creepiest place in the entire forest and is said to defy the investigations of soil scientists, and attracts Roman witches as well as people trying to clean the forest of its evil. Now, the forest first came to international attention in 1968, when a military technician by the name of Emil Barnier photographed what he believed was a UFO hovering over the clearing. Now, at the time, the communist government equated the belief in the paranormal as madness, as well as state sabotage, so in turn, Barnier lost his job. As of today, many people who visit the forest, and specifically the clearing, report strange symptoms, including nausea, anxiety, as well as the feeling of being watched. Not to mention, as I said before, nothing seems to grow in the clearing according to official records. Weirder still, trees in the surrounding area grow in odd patterns, zigzags and spirals that no one has been able to explain. Very creepy indeed. And finally, coming in at number 1, Uekihara Forest, Japan. Also known as the Sea of Trees, or more commonly the Suicide Forest, this is a forest on the northwestern flank of Japan's Mount Fuji, existing on the hardened lava laid down by the last major eruption of Mount Fuji in 864 CE. The forest has a reputation as the home to ghosts of the dead in Japanese mythology. In more recent years, though, it has become known as the Suicide Forest, with it being one of the world's most used suicide sites. In 2003, 105 bodies were discovered in the forest, exceeding the previous record of around 78 back in 2002. Jumping forward to 2010, the police recorded more than 200 people having attempted suicide in the forest, of whom 54 were successful, which is absolutely devastating. Now, some people blame this horrific trend on the forest's association with demons in Japanese mythology. However, others credit it to the tightly packed trees, which make it easy to get lost in the forest and muffle sounds, in turn providing an isolated location. As you would expect, many spiritualists have visited the forest who have called the site a hotbed of paranormal activity. These people believe that the suicides in the forest have permeated the forest's trees, which in turn has generated paranormal activity in the area, preventing anyone who may enter from leaving the depths of the forest. Many hikers who decide to make their way through the dense forest will often mark their path with tape or string to make it easier to find their way out again, and those who visit say the forest is deeply unsettling, with the sprinkling of clothing and litter lying around. Coming in at number 5, we have Devil's Tramping Ground, North Carolina. The Devil's Tramping Ground is a camping spot located in a forest near the Harper's Crossroads area in Bear Creek, North Carolina. Throughout history, it has been the subject of persistent local legends and lore, which frequently allege that the devil tramps and haunts a barren circle of ground in which nothing is said to grow. It has also been listed frequently on lists of unusual place names, as you would expect. In North Carolina, tales about the ring, also known as the circle of ground, are well known. These include the disappearance of objects left within the ring overnight, dogs howling, and strange events occurring to those who are brave enough to spend the night within its boundaries. It has been alleged, as I previously mentioned, that nothing has grown within the ring for 100 years. Legend says that this is the very place that the devil himself itself can rise from the depths of fiery hell and thus come to Earth. Sounds great to me. It is also said that at this place the devil is supposed to walk in circles on certain nights and bring his evil into this world. Journalist John William Harden wrote about the area, stating, "Chatham natives say that the devil goes there to walk in circles as he thinks up new means of causing trouble for humanity. There, sometimes during the dark of night, the majesty of the underworld of evil silently tramps around that bare circle, thinking, plotting and planning against good in behalf of wrong." In at number 4 we have Wychwood Forest, England. Wychwood Forest is a biological site of special scientific interest north of Witney in Oxfordshire. Now, unlike the rest of our list, there is no historic event that took place that confirms the forest is in fact haunted. However, it is said by those who step foot in the area that there is hair-raising stuff going on amongst the trees. Some people have reported seeing the apparitions of crying children in a horse-drawn carriage, to even ghostly hands touching them. A more notable story is that of the ghost of Amy Robsart, the wife of the Earl of Leicester. Amy mysteriously died of a broken neck, and one day while hunting in the Wychwood Forest, her husband was said to have stumbled across her ghost. According to the legend, her ghost told him that he would be dead in 10 days. And that he was. The legend has lived on, and it is said that if you dwell in the Wychwood Forest, you will meet the same grisly end as Amy's husband. Coming in at number 3, the Jervis Ghosts. Jervis Street, located in the middle of Dublin city centre, has served as the backdrop for many encounters with the unknown and the world of the dead through their eyes, proving that ghosts can be seen and felt almost anywhere, even on populated high streets. The Jervis Shopping Centre opened back in 1996 and is currently home to over 70 retailers, and surprisingly is a popular destination for many ghost hunters out there. Some history for you. Not everyone may know this, but the shopping centre was actually built on the ground of Jervis Street Hospital, which closed in the 1980s after attending the needs of the sick and dying for almost 300 years. Many of course credit the creepy goings on in Jervis Street area to the restless spirits who died in its wards. In 2008, a newsreader from the radio station Today FM was apparently walking along the busy street outside Jervis Shopping Centre only to be stopped in their tracks by a female voice singing a lullaby close by. Creepy. The newsreader assumed they were hearing things and continued to walk with the lullaby fading out. However, it quickly became louder again as she moved further away. The moment lingered with her to the point that she mentioned it on her talk show, and within minutes the lines were flooded with callers citing similar occurrences. Many workers from the shopping centre claimed to have seen the figure of a woman in an old nurse's uniform wandering between the stores, while others told of fruit being tossed through the air by seemingly no one. One person, while approaching the centre's bathrooms, was eyed by a woman who whispered at them before vanishing into thin air, and several others mentioned having met similar spirits not far from the centre. Sure, that makes sense. Coming in at 2, the moving mother of Ballinspittle. In July 1985, something strange occurred in the village of Ballinspittle, Cork. While travelling home one evening, a local reported seeing a roadside statue of the Virgin Mary moving on its own accord. And while some summed it up to a trick of the light, countless other locals have also reported similar occurrences. People from the village as well as people from abroad flocked to the site where the activity seemed to be occurring, with up to 100,000 people said to have visited Ballinspittle alone. The Catholic Church was of course a little uncertain of the legitimacy of the case, with one bishop outright calling it an illusion. According to a team of psychologists from University Cork though, the vision was the result of staring at stationary objects during the transient light of dusk. Anthropologist Peter Mulholland also said that the visions of the Virgin Mary in Irish culture is simply the result of the population's relationship with religion. However, what the answer is anyone's guess. There's plenty out there who truly believe the Mother of God did appear all over Ireland between July and August of 1985. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Black Cat of Killachy. Back in 1968, Margaret O'Brien and her husband purchased an abandoned home on the outskirts of Dublin City. However, they could have never predicted the events that were soon to unfold. Margaret originally intended to restore the property and turn it into an art centre, so she allowed several workmen to live on site to maintain pace. Soon though, the workmen began to report back to the O'Briens with some disturbing stories. After dark each night, they would hear animal sounds from within the walls of the house, even though they couldn't find any evidence of an infestation. Margaret disregarded their concerns, however she quickly came to learn of the building's strange condition herself. One evening when arriving at the house to speak with the project's lead painter, Margaret was met with more claims of wild animals loose on the property. So this time she agreed to stay the night in order to observe. Walking to her room, she saw for the first time a gargantuan black cat sitting in the middle of the hallway. She claimed the creature was no ordinary house cat, but rather panther-esque, with evil and intelligence in its gaze. In a split second though, the creature disappeared. Soon after the incident, the lead painter was visited by the huge cat, however this time it brought along with it mist. Due to all of these events, Margaret contacted a local priest to perform an exorcism on the home, as you would, which actually seemed to be effective. So Margaret finally opened the art centre, however peace didn't last because one evening a group of drunken actors decided to hold a seance in an attempt to call upon the monstrous cat that they had heard so much about. They were seemingly successful because the haunting resumed more powerfully this time, with the cat now being joined by the malevolent spirits of two nuns who began to terrorize the building's gallery. This time Margaret called for a medium for help and finally learned the truth of the cat. The medium told her that the female spirits had been attendants of the satanic rituals performed by the infamous Hellfire Club. She went on to suggest that the house was once owned by its members. Recently in 2012, the theory finally got some bulk, with another site said to have been frequented by Hellfire members, with a painting of a black cat bathed in flames being uncovered. Coming in at 5, Drunken Thady and the Bishop's Lady. In Limerick City stands an impressive piece of stonework by the name of Thomond Bridge, which spans the dark waters of the River Shannon. The bridge was built back in 1836 by a pair of designers named James and George Payne, and according to rumours, their last name would set the tone of future happenings for years to come. The story surrounding the bridge is that of Drunken Thady and the Bishop's Lady. Thady was the local troublemonger in Sloven, and the lady was the wife of the Bishop of Limerick. However, unbeknownst to her husband, she enjoyed a life of vice when the sun went down. One night while both women were out and about on the bridge, they crossed paths with one another and began to fight, as you do. The Bishop's Lady attempted to push Thady into the river below. However, when she attempted to beg God to forgive her wicked ways and spare her life, the push was unsuccessful. The struggle only ended when the Bishop's Lady fell into the water instead and quickly drowned. Now there are many who say the furious spirit of the Bishop's Lady haunts the Thomond Bridge, ready to pull late night walkers into the water below. However, don't fret, because apparently the Bishop Lady's fingerprints will appear on the stone side of the bridge before she pulls you below, so you have time to run. If you see fingers, run. Not all fingers are good fingers. Coming in at 4, the patron of Gravediggers Pub. The Gravediggers Pub has been standing since 1833 and is named for its original owner, John Kavanagh, who fathered 25 children and has a handful of descendants still alive today. And now the pub is in Glasnevin, which is also known for its cemeteries, both Glasnevin Cemetery and Prospect Cemetery, which lies directly beside the pub, in turn giving it its nickname. Due to this, one long-standing tradition is for patrons to order a pint by shoveling a scoop of graveyard dirt against the outside wall of the pub. So as you would expect, with the pub being so close to the cemetery, it gets a handful of guests that aren't on the same plane as us. One of the pub's most well-known customers is regarded very fondly by the living regulars. The spirit takes the form of an older gentleman in vintage tweed and has been known to appear in the corner of the bar, quietly enjoying a Guinness until he finishes his pint and vanishes from sight. The staff actually encourage those who see him to buy him a pint for the road. In my opinion, they're just trying to take your cash.
Coming in at number 3, we've got Tomino's Hell. You've likely heard of Dante's Inferno, which while often quite disturbing, doesn't come with a curse attached. Tomino's Hell does! This poem by Saijo Yaso depicts a young boy descending into hell for unnamed crimes. Sweet Tomino is going to Jigoku, the Buddhist hell. Speaking of Jigoku, if you haven't seen the flick of the same name by Nobuo Nakagawa, drop what you're doing and watch it right now. Not only is it a fantastic visual marvel of a movie, it'll also make the story much scarier through its depiction of Buddhist hell. It's never explicitly stated in the poem, but it appears as if Tomino is heading down for killing his family. Apparently, if you read this poem out loud, you'll be cursed. Misfortune and death will follow anyone who decides to recite it. Back when this tale was first circulated, there were plenty of folks who would post on 2chan claiming that they were going to try. Photos, videos, and sound clips of people reading the poem were posted. Many said that nothing happened to them, but some others never returned after saying the cursed words aloud. The poem itself isn't very long, so I considered reading it aloud for everyone out there, but kind of like not being cursed, so maybe I'll wait for a day when I feel more open to eternal torment. Feel free to try yourself though. Coming in at number 2, we've got Kuchisake Onna. It's hard to come up with a Japanese urban legend more popular than the slit-mouthed woman. She's on every list, featured in every article, plastered on the front of all sorts of movies, manga, and anime. This is an urban legend with staying power. The story goes that late at night, a woman wearing a surgical mask will approach lone travelers. Oftentimes, these solitary strollers will be children. She'll ask them, "Am I beautiful?" And if you answer no, you're cooked. She'll pull out a pair of gnarly scissors and kill you on the spot, so be nice. If you answer yes, she'll remove her mask, revealing a gruesome, grotesque grin. Her mouth has been lengthened, and what I mean by this is that her face is slit from ear to ear. Then she'll ask you the question again. If you answer no, well, you're still cooked, you die. But if you give her a positive answer, you're not much better off this time. Kuchisake Onna is so relieved that someone thinks she's beautiful, she'll want you to join in on the fun. The scissors come out and she'll give you a smile just like hers. Now you're twins. If you'd rather keep your life and your facial structure, you can try to confuse her. By answering with wishy-washy statements, you might find a window with which to escape. Some say that answering her questions with more questions can also result in confusion. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, how did she end up with that slit mouth? It's been said that she was an adulterous wife and her husband caught her cheating. In a rage, he cut her mouth, asking, "Who will think you're beautiful now?" Yikes. The surgical mask has always been a popular accessory in Japan, as it's considered good manners to wear one when you're sick. Now that masks are everywhere as a result of the current pandemic, do you think Kuchisake Onna will be making some appearances elsewhere? And finally at number 1, we've got Akamanto. This one scares me because of where it tends to happen. See, Akamanto, or Red Cloak, is a masked spirit who appears before folks using public restrooms. I like my privacy, thank you very much. There are many different variations on this legend, but usually the spirit will appear in a red cloak and ask someone on the toilet a question. Red toilet paper or blue? Just like the Matrix. However, there's less actual choice here. Pick either one and you'll end up the same. Choose red and you'll die a bloody death. Choose blue and you'll suffocate to death, turning blue. Even if you decide you'd rather use plain old white toilet paper, you'll be pulled to hell by a ghastly apparition. There is no winning here. Or is there?
Coming in at 5, Princess Brunhild at Rostrap. This legend goes that years ago there ruled a king in Bohemia whose castle was atop a loft mountain where thunder and eagles found a home. Now this king had a daughter, Princess Brunhild, whose beauty was famous far and wide. Rulers and their sons sought the hand of the maiden, and among the suitors came the son of the king of Hearts, who won her heart. He returned his father to announce his betrothal and to make arrangement for the nuptials. However, someone had other plans. A new suitor arrived for Brunhilde's hand, a terrible giant who inhabited North Europe, terrifying all those who saw him. He brought with him costly gifts of gold, amber, and precious stones, and after a few days of consideration, the king promised the giant his daughter. Now the giant had 2 steeds, one white as snow and the other black as night, both giant with the earth trembling beneath them as they ran. So one day Brunhilde begged to ride with the giant. She mounted the white steed and raced to be with her true love Hars. The black steed was in quick pursuit behind her. At the very top of the treacherous Rostrap, Brunhilde reached the cliff edge. However, her brave white stallion had other ideas and jumped right across the mountain and reached the other side. The giant, however, did not and ultimately plunged to his death. Atop the Rostrap hill in the Hars mountain range, you will find the hoof shapes imprinted into the rock on the edge of the cliff, marking the path the great white steed took when freeing the trapped princess. Coming in at 4, the Watzmann Mountain. The Watzmann is a mountain in the Bavarian Alps and is the 3rd highest in Germany, and the highest mountain located entirely on German territory. Now, for a mountain so famous throughout the country, you can imagine there would be a handful of legends associated with it. And that there are. One legend goes that in the deepest corners of southern Bavaria, a tyrannical king named Watzmann reigned the land and enjoyed slavery and hunting local peasants. On one particular day, after a series of bloody killings, a curse was cast upon him and his family, which resulted in them all turning to stone. Now it is said that they are still entombed within the range of 7 mountains, near the town of Berchtesgaden. Would you climb this peak to discover if the legend is true? If so, I'll be right there with you. In at 3, the Witch's Tree. On 6th Street and Park Ave in Louisville, Kentucky, you will find what can only be described as a natural monstrosity. A knotted tree, so misshapen and tortured that it could easily serve as a portal to hell. Now, even if the tree itself didn't catch your attention, the trinkets, baubles, and bead necklaces hanging from the branches certainly would. They are items that have been placed by the Louisville locals to appease the vengeful witches. Now, the legend of the bizarre tree begins in the late 19th century, where it was supposedly the gathering place for a coven of witches, where they would perform their ceremonies. All was well until a city planning committee decided to remove the tree ahead of the annual May Day celebration. This, of course, displeased the witches greatly, so much so that they cast a curse. Exactly 11 months to the day after the tree was cut down, the city suffered a storm so severe it was assumed by locals that the witches had made good on their curse and summoned a storm demon. Now, during this horrendous storm, lightning struck the stump of the old witch's tree, and suddenly a new tree began to grow. However, it was not a healthy tree, but rather twisted and otherworldly. Now, whether these stories are true or not, the locals of Louisville believe this tree houses something dark and sinister, and to this day continue to adorn it with baubles and trinkets. In at 2, the Headless Woman of Iroquois Park. Iroquois Park is a 739-acre park in Louisville, Kentucky, designed by Frederick Law Cherokee and Shawnee Parks. It is a serene and picturesque park with an old-growth forest and viewpoint atop the hill. However, as you wander through the forest and the winding trails on a warm night, you may begin to hear the sound of a dog barking wildly. Following that, a thick fog will roll in, partially obstructing your vision. Then, you will smell the stench of smoke and fire begin to rise in the air. The fog will break, but just for a moment, and then you'll see a figure begin to approach. Now, accounts vary, but some state that a woman will appear dressed in early 1800 settlement clothes, and as she walks through the park, you can see her very clearly holding her head in her hands as blood drips from her severed neck. The legend has been passed down from generation to generation, with each new storyteller making it much more gruesome. For those looking for a thrill, it is said that the Headless Woman is regularly seen close to the lookout point, with some suspecting that she is the ghost of a farmer's wife who settled with her husband in the area where the park is now located. The story goes that one night while her husband was downtown on business, an Indian tribe attempted to sneak up on the homestead and ransack it. The intruders grabbed the woman and beheaded her before promptly setting fire to the home. Now, whether you believe this is that very same woman is up to you, but regardless, there have been far too many accounts of parkgoers seeing the Headless Woman for it to be simply legend. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Pope Lick Monster. The Pope Lick Monster is said to be a part man, part goat, and part sheep creature reported to live beneath a railroad trestle bridge over Pope Lick Creek in the Fisherville neighborhood of Louisville, Kentucky. Now, numerous urban legends exist about the creature and its origins, with some accounts claiming that the creature uses hypnosis or voice mimicry to lure trespassers onto the trestle in order to kill them. However, other accounts claim that the creature jumps down from the trestle onto the roofs of cars passing beneath it. No matter what the story, the creature is so unsettling to those who see it that they are driven to leap off of the trestle. Its origins vary, but some reports state that the human-goat hybrid was a circus freak who vowed revenge after being mistreated. In another version, the monster escaped from a train that was derailed on the trestle. And the final rumor is that the creature is really the twisted reincarnated form of a farmer who sacrificed goats in exchange for satanic powers. No matter which way you spin it, this creature is horrifying and is said to be behind a number of deaths and accidents at the trestle since its initial construction, despite the now looming 8-foot fence built to keep thrill seekers out. In at 5, the Witch Girl of Pilot's Knob. Now, this legend comes to us from Marion, Kentucky, where a young girl is said to be buried in a concrete grave. Back in 1916, a woman named Mary Louise Ford and her 5-year-old daughter Mary Ellen Ford were living in Pilot's Knob. The mother and daughter were accused of being witches, and instead of waiting for the trial, the frightened villagers dragged the mother and daughter out of the house and burned them alive at the stake. Classic witch business. They then buried the mother's body in a different location, and to avoid the young girl coming back from the dead and seeking revenge, the fearful villagers made sure to take precautions. They buried the daughter in Pilot's Knob in a steel reinforced coffin, and then after lowering it into the grave, they filled it with concrete. Following that, they put gravel on top and built a metal fence all around the gravesite. Yeah, they were pretty damn scared. According to legend, the young girl's ghost paces back and forth behind the fence, searching for her mother who was buried somewhere else. Yet she cannot escape the confines of the fence. Many locals have even reported seeing tiny child's footprints in the gravel over her grave, and some believe that if you visit the girl's grave alone and get too close, her hands will come up and grab a hold of you and drag you down into the concrete. Folks who have reported to see her go say that she wears a white dress that is scorched at the bottom and her long blonde hair smolders at the ends. In at 4, the Hanging Man of Allendale Train Tunnel. The Allendale Train Tunnel is located south of Cincinnati in the woods behind the Allendale Trailer Park in Ellesmere, Kentucky. Now, legend goes that some years ago, a man hung himself from a hook that is set above the tunnel entrance. The man's ghost is said to walk the tunnel or even appear hanging from the hook. Not only that, but there are also reports of disembodied voices as well as screams coming from inside the tunnel. Now, for those seeking to locate the tunnel, there has been some confusion simply because it's known as a train tunnel, yet no trains run through it. It's actually a tunnel for the stream that runs under the tracks. In order to reach it, you must enter the woods, travel down a hill and follow the stream to reach the tunnel, which is now heavily graffitied and littered. Although in urban legend, one element rings true. There is a hook above the entrance to the tunnel, the clear indicator that you're in the right place. Enjoy. Coming in at 3, soul-stealing dreams. Now this one is truly terrifying because not only does it involve your dreams but also your dead family members. It's The legend goes that dreaming of a dead loved one is a bad omen, especially near water. It is said that the dead family member will call you towards them, and if you embrace them in your dream, they will steal your soul away. Lovely. One particular story occurred on a Korean TV show where they would discuss hauntings and encounters with the paranormal. I quote, "During one of the episodes they had a family on where they talk about how their grandmother had passed away. The man said that he dreamt that his grandmother was beckoning him over while she was waist deep in water. For some reason he didn't go and he told his wife. His wife explained that going into the arms of a dead person, in water no less, was a sure sign that your soul was going to be stolen. The husband said he kept having the same dream, and every time he was closer and closer to the grandmother until one day the family realized that they had kept something of hers. They paid respects to her once more and the dream stopped." Lesson number 1. If you're from Korea, do not hang on to any of your deceased family members' belongings. They will literally steal your soul for it. Coming in at 2. The Virgin Ghost. Stories of virginal ghosts are everywhere in Korea. They're often found in abandoned buildings, but more typically they're found in hospitals, schools, bathrooms, cemeteries, and wooded areas. Just don't go to these places and you're cool, I guess. Now, these virgin ghosts almost always have long hair covering their faces and dressed in white garbs. This is due to the fact that tradition stated that single women should always wear their hair up, and the white garb is usually worn during death. In Confucian Korean tradition, it was a woman's role to serve her father, husband, and sons. If she died before being able to fulfill this goal, she would be cursed to walk the earth for eternity. Now, legend goes that when you're in the presence of a virgin ghost, you will know it. This is because you will feel a sudden change in temperature, perhaps a sudden chill, and the wind will often change direction. One story goes that, I quote, "A man was living on the topmost floor of the apartment building. One late night, he heard someone knocking on his door. He did not find anyone at the door, but he heard a voice telling him to count to 100 with his eyes closed and without making any noise. He started counting but got curious at 49. He opened his eyes and found a virgin ghost staring at him. It is said that virgin ghosts are most likely to be found in abandoned buildings. They are dressed in white and have long hair. Very spooky indeed." And finally, in at number 1, the haunted bathroom. Now, for some very strange reason, Koreans have a lot, and I mean a lot, of stories about haunted schools, particularly haunted school bathrooms. Yeah, it's unsettling. But to be fair, Korean schools are definitely eerie. What with their dark stairwells and long hallways, they seem to be never ending. And of course, the creepy, oftentimes half-lit fluorescent lights. Enter Korean school bathrooms, which in pop culture are often depicted as decrepit, old, crumbling, and always dark. Now, legend has it that one of these stalls in these bathrooms, particularly the stall located towards the back, is where a girl killed herself and supposedly now haunts it. Students whisper that the toilet flushes by itself and that the door will close with no wind around.
Rumor has it that if you're alone in the bathroom you can hear the crying. Some also state that you can often see her watching you from inside the mirror. Another legend from a similar vein talks of a ghost that emerges from the toilet and asks you if you will use red or blue toilet paper. Honestly, neither, we all use white, right? If you choose red, the ghost will cut you open. If you choose blue, the ghost will choke you to death, leaving your body blue from suffocation. It's a lose-lose no matter what.